The shutter clicked for the thousandth time that day, but this time, my hands were trembling. Not from exhaustion. Not from the weight of my camera equipment. But from the devastating realization that I was about to witness the two people I trusted most in this world promise to love each other, until death do them part. My name is Clara, I am 36 years old, and I have always been the girl behind the camera. For the past 15 years, I have built my career on capturing the most precious moments in people's lives. Weddings, anniversaries, pregnancy announcements, family reunions. You name it, I have been there with my lens, freezing time and preserving memories that families will treasure for generations. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the day my best friend Elena asked me to photograph her wedding. To him. To Liam. The boy who had been my first love, my teenage everything, my entire world when I was 17 years old. The boy who used to whisper in my ear during late-night phone calls. You are the kind of girl I will marry one day, Clara. Just wait and see. But one day never came. And now, 18 years later, I was standing in a vineyard in Napa Valley, watching him marry someone else. Someone who was supposed to be my closest friend in the world. The morning had started like any other wedding day. I arrived at the bridal suite at 6 in the morning, my camera bag slung over my shoulder, ready to capture those precious getting-ready moments that brides always treasure. Elena was sitting in front of a vintage vanity mirror, her hair in rollers, a silk robe draped around her shoulders. Clara, she squealed when she saw me, jumping up to give me a hug. I cannot believe this day is finally here. I am so nervous I could barely sleep last night. I forced a smile and began unpacking my equipment. You look beautiful already, I told her, adjusting my camera settings. Liam is going to lose his mind when he sees you walking down that aisle. The mention of his name sent a familiar stab of pain through my chest, but I pushed it down. I had become an expert at compartmentalizing my emotions over the years. It was a survival skill I had developed out of necessity. As I began photographing Elena's morning routine, my mind drifted back to how we had all ended up here. How the three of us had become entangled in this twisted web of love, betrayal, and broken promises. Liam and I had met during our junior year of high school. He was the new kid who had transferred from Oregon, and I was the quiet girl who spent most of her time in the darkroom developing photographs for the school newspaper. We were an unlikely pair, but somehow we just clicked. He was everything I was not. Outgoing, confident, the kind of person who could walk into any room and instantly become the center of attention. I was shy, introspective, more comfortable observing life through the viewfinder of my camera than actually living it. But when we were together, I felt like I could be anyone. He made me feel beautiful, interesting, worthy of attention. He would sit with me for hours in the darkroom, watching me work, asking questions about photography, telling me about his dreams of becoming a writer. I am going to write novels, he would say, his eyes bright with possibility. And you are going to be a famous photographer. We will travel the world together, creating art, living this incredible bohemian life. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. We dated through senior year, and even though we were accepted to different colleges, we promised to make it work. He was going to UCLA for creative writing, and I was headed to the Art Institute of Chicago for photography. We swore that distance would not come between us. For the first 2 years, we kept that promise. We called each other every night, wrote letters, visited whenever we could afford plane tickets. He would send me drafts of his stories, and I would mail him photographs I had taken around the city. But by junior year, something began to change. The calls became less frequent. The letters stopped coming. When I would visit him in Los Angeles, he seemed distracted, distant. There was always somewhere else he needed to be, someone else he needed to see. I told myself it was just the stress of college, the pressure of our academic programs. I convinced myself that once we graduated, everything would go back to the way it was. We would finally be able to start that life we had dreamed about together. But after graduation, instead of growing closer, we drifted even further apart. He moved to San Francisco and got a job at a tech startup, writing copy for their marketing department. I stayed in Chicago and began building my photography business, slowly. We still texted occasionally, liked each other's posts on social media. But the deep connection we had once shared felt like it belonged to different people. People we used to be but could never be again. Then 3 years ago, everything changed. I had moved back to my hometown in Northern California to be closer to my aging parents. I was lonely, struggling to rebuild my client base in a new city, feeling like I had made a terrible mistake in leaving Chicago. That was when Elena reached out. We had been friends in high school, but not particularly close. She was part of the popular crowd, the kind of girl who always had plans, always had a boyfriend, always seemed to have her life perfectly together. I was surprised when she sent me a message on Facebook. "Clara, I heard you moved back to town. We should catch up sometime. I am going through a rough patch and could really use a friend." I was desperate for companionship, so I agreed to meet her for coffee. She told me about her recent divorce, how her husband had left her for his secretary, how she was struggling to start over at 33. "I feel so lost," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I had my whole life figured out, and now I do not even know who I am anymore." I felt a genuine connection to her pain. I understood what it was like to feel adrift, to have your plans crumble, and leave you wondering what came next. So I became her shoulder to cry on, her late-night phone call, her weekend companion. What I did not know was that while she was crying on my shoulder about her failed marriage, she was also asking me carefully crafted questions about my past, about my relationships, about Liam. "You never talk about dating," she would say during our girls' nights in. "Come on, there has to be someone who broke your heart. Tell me about your first love." And like a fool, I told her everything. About how Liam and I had met, about our dreams of traveling the world together, about how he had been the only man I had ever truly loved, about how I still thought about him sometimes, wondered what might have been if we had tried harder to make it work. "You should reach out to him," she would say. "What is the worst that could happen? Maybe he has been thinking about you too." I always laughed off her suggestions. "That was a lifetime ago, Elena. We are different people now. Besides, I have no idea if he is even single." But she kept pushing, kept asking questions, kept encouraging me to look him up on social media. And eventually, I gave in. I found his Instagram profile and spent hours scrolling through his photos. He looked older, more mature, but still heartbreakingly handsome. He was living in San Francisco, working as a freelance writer, still single as far as I could tell. I showed Elena his profile during one of our wine nights. "Oh wow," she said, studying his pictures intently. "He is really attractive. No wonder you fell so hard for him." "Was attractive," I corrected her. "That was 18 years ago. I am sure he would not even remember me now." "Are you kidding? You do not forget your first love. Trust me, he remembers you." Her words gave me hope. Dangerous hope that maybe there was still a chance for us. Maybe all those years of wondering, what if, did not have to remain unanswered questions. So I did something I had never done before. I sent him a message. "Hey stranger. I know this is completely random, but I moved back to California and was thinking about old times. Would you like to get coffee sometime? It would be great to catch up." He responded within an hour. "Clara, what a wonderful surprise. I would love to catch up. I am actually going to be in your area next weekend for a work conference. Are you free Saturday afternoon?" I screamed. Actually screamed out loud in my empty apartment. After all these years, I was finally going to see him again. I called Elena immediately. He said yes. I practically shouted into the phone. "We are meeting for coffee next Saturday. I cannot believe this is actually happening." "That is amazing," she said, but something in her voice sounded strange. Forced. "I am so happy for you. I have no idea what to wear. What do you even say to someone you have not seen in 15 years? What if he thinks I look old? What if we have nothing to talk about?" Clara breathed. "You are going to be fine. He reached out because he wants to see you. That has to mean something, right?" She was right. I spent the entire week preparing for our meeting. I bought a new outfit, got my hair done, practiced conversation starters in the mirror. I felt like a teenager again, nervous and excited and terrified all at once. Saturday arrived, and I drove to the coffee shop we had agreed on. My heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in my car, checking my makeup in the rearview mirror, trying to calm my nerves. Then I saw him walking across the parking lot, and my breath caught in my throat. He was even more handsome than his photos had suggested, taller than I remembered, with threads of silver in his dark hair that only made him more distinguished. He was wearing a navy sweater that brought out his eyes, and when he smiled and waved at me through the window, I felt like I was 17 again. Clara, he said when I got out of my car, and the way he said my name made my knees weak. You look incredible. I mean, you always did, but wow. We hugged, and for a moment, I felt like I was home, like all the years between us had never happened. The coffee date lasted 4 hours. We talked about everything and nothing, catching up on careers and family, sharing stories about our adventures and misadventures in adulthood. The conversation flowed as easily as it had when we were teenagers, and I found myself falling for him all over again. I have to ask, he said as we were getting ready to leave. Do you ever think about us? About what might have happened if we had tried harder to make it work? My heart nearly stopped. All the time, I admitted. I always wondered if we gave up too easily. He reached across the table and took my hand. I have regretted letting you go for 15 years. I was young and stupid and thought there would always be time to figure things out. I should have fought for us. Maybe it is not too late, I said, hardly believing the words were coming out of my mouth. Maybe it is not, he agreed, squeezing my hand. We made plans to see each other again the following weekend, and then the weekend after that. Before long, we were talking every day, texting constantly, video chatting late into the night just like we used to do in college. I felt like I was living in a dream. After all these years of wondering what if, I was finally getting my second chance with the love of my life. I told Elena about our reconnection, about how perfectly everything was falling into place, about how I had never been happier. I am so glad you two found each other again, she said, but again something in her voice sounded off. You deserve to be happy. For 2 months, Liam and I rebuilt our relationship. We spent weekends together, took day trips to San Francisco, talked about our future with the same excitement we had shared as teenagers. He told me he had never stopped loving me, that every relationship he had been in since college had been an attempt to replace what we had shared. You were the one, he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from his apartment balcony. You have always been the one. I believed him. More than that, I trusted him. I was ready to move to San Francisco, to start over, to finally live the life we had dreamed about when we were young and fearless and thought love could conquer anything. Then one day he stopped responding to my texts. At first, I thought maybe he was busy with work. Then I thought maybe his phone was broken. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into a month, and I heard nothing from him. I was devastated, confused, angry. I called and texted and emailed, but he had completely vanished from my life, just like he had done 15 years before. Elena was there for me through it all. She brought me wine and tissues and listened to me cry for hours about how stupid I had been to believe that someone could love me the way Liam had claimed to. I do not understand, I kept saying. Everything was perfect. We were making plans. He said he loved me. How could he just disappear like that? Men are cowards, Elena would tell me. They say what they think you want to hear, and then when things get real, they run. You are better off without him. But I did not feel better off. I felt broken, used, like I had been played for a fool twice by the same man. It took me 6 months to start functioning normally again. 6 months of Elena checking on me every day, bringing me groceries when I was too depressed to leave my apartment, forcing me to shower and eat and pretend to be human. You are an amazing friend, I told her one night. I do not know what I would have done without you. That is what friends are for, she said. I will always be here for you. But she was lying. Even as she was comforting me, even as she was helping me pick up the pieces of my broken heart, she was betraying me in the most fundamental way possible. Because 3 months later, she posted a photo on Instagram. A photo of her and Liam at a restaurant in San Francisco. Her hand was resting on his chest, and they were both smiling at the camera like they had just shared the most wonderful secret in the world. The caption read, "Sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them." Hashtag new love, hashtag blessed, hashtag soulmate. I stared at that photo for so long that my phone screen went dark. Then I turned it back on and stared some more, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The comments were full of congratulations from mutual friends, people asking how long they had been together, people saying they made a beautiful couple. I took several shots, directing them to move slightly, to adjust their poses, to look at each other with more intensity. Beautiful, I said, checking my camera settings. Now, I want you to look into each other's eyes and think about your future together. Think about all the adventures you are going to have, all the memories you are going to make. They gazed at each other adoringly, and I prepared to take the shot that would define their entire wedding album. But just before I pressed the shutter, I spoke again. Liam, I said casually, as if I was just making conversation while I worked. This reminds me of prom night, when you said you wished it had been me in that dress instead of Jennifer Martinez. The effect was immediate and devastating. Liam's smile faltered, his eyes widened with shocking guilt. Elena's head snapped toward him, confusion and suspicion replacing the love that had been shining in her eyes just moments before. What is she talking about? Elena asked, but I had already captured the moment. Click. That single photograph contained everything. Liam's guilt, Elena's dawning realization that her new husband had been thinking about another woman on their wedding day, and the devastating truth that their perfect love story was built on a foundation of lies and betrayal. I think we got it, I said, lowering my camera. That was beautiful. But Elena was not looking at me. She was staring at Liam, who had gone pale and was opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. Liam, she said slowly. What is she talking about? It was nothing, he stammered. It was just, we were talking about old times, and I made some stupid comment. It did not mean anything. You told her you wished she had been your prom date instead of me? No, not you. Jennifer Martinez. She was my prom date in high school. Clara, tell her what I said. But I just smiled and started packing up my equipment. I think I have everything I need for the album. You two should probably get back to your guests. I left them standing under that willow tree, Elena demanding explanations and Liam stumbling through increasingly desperate justifications. I finished photographing the reception, captured the cake cutting and the first dance and all the other traditional moments that wedding albums require. But that photograph under the tree, that moment of truth, that was the image that would define their marriage forever. I spent the next week carefully editing their wedding photos, making sure every image was technically perfect and emotionally resonant. I arranged them in a beautiful leather album, with their ceremony photos in the front and their reception photos in the back. And right there on the final page, in the place of honor where most couples put their favorite romantic shot, I placed the photograph from under the willow tree. Liam's guilt was captured in stunning detail. Elena's confusion and hurt were heartbreaking to see. And there, in the background, slightly out of focus but still visible, was me, holding my camera, looking satisfied in a way that would haunt them every time they looked at their wedding album. I delivered the album to their apartment exactly 1 week after their wedding, along with a note that simply said, "Congratulations on your special day. I hope these photos help you remember it forever." Elena texted me 2 days later. "You ruined it." I never replied. Instead, I used the money from their wedding to open my own studio, a boutique photography business that I named Clara Cuts Deep. I specialized in what I called emotionally honest photography, the kind of images that captured not just what people wanted to see, but what was actually happening beneath the surface. My reputation grew quickly. Clients came to me because they wanted photographs that told the truth, even when the truth was uncomfortable. I developed a following among people who were tired of fake smiles and posed perfection, who wanted their real stories documented with unflinching honesty. But I never did wedding photography again. That wedding, Elena and Liam's wedding, was my last. It was the day I stopped hiding behind my camera and started using it as a weapon. Because I learned something important that day. When someone steals your past, when they betray your trust and break your heart, and then have the audacity to ask you to celebrate their happiness, you do not fight for what you have lost. You frame it. You freeze it. You capture it in perfect, devastating detail. And you let them live with it forever. Now 2 years later, I hear through mutual friends that Elena and Liam are getting divorced. Apparently, they could never quite recover from their wedding day, could never quite trust each other the way they had before. The photograph from under the willow tree hangs in their living room, a constant reminder of the moment their perfect love story began to crumble. Some people might say that what I did was cruel, that I let my hurt and anger turn me into someone I should not have been. But I disagree. I think what I did was honest. I captured the truth of their relationship, the guilty secrets and hidden resentments that would have destroyed them eventually anyway. I just made sure they could never forget how it felt when that destruction began. And every time I look at my business card, every time I see the words, Clara Cuts Deep printed in elegant script, I remember that day under the willow tree. I remember the click of my camera, the satisfaction of perfect timing, the sweet taste of revenge served at exactly the right temperature. Because sometimes, the most beautiful photographs are the ones that hurt the most to look at. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply telling the truth at exactly the right moment. That wedding album sits somewhere in Elena's house, probably tucked away in a closet or hidden in a drawer where she does not have to look at it every day. But she knows it is there. She knows that somewhere in that collection of memories, there is a photograph that captures the exact moment her marriage began to fall apart. And she knows that I am the one who took it. They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but that photograph under the willow tree was worth something much more valuable than words. It was worth the satisfaction of knowing that after years of wondering, what if, after months of planning and waiting and hoping, I had finally gotten exactly what I deserved. Not Liam. Not the life we had dreamed about together. But something better. The perfect shot. Subscribe to our channel for more emotionally charged stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, friendship, and revenge. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because you would not want to miss our next jaw-dropping tale of betrayal and redemption. They thought firing a pregnant woman would end my career. Instead, it ignited a fire that would burn down everything they built while I constructed an empire from my nursery chair. My name is Jenna, and this is the story of how I turned the most devastating betrayal of my professional life into the sweetest revenge imaginable. At 35 years old, I was finally pregnant after 3 grueling years of fertility treatments that had drained my bank account and tested my marriage to its breaking point. Every injection, every disappointment, every negative test had led me to this moment. I was glowing with the kind of radiance that comes from a dream finally realized. I was grateful beyond measure. And I was still grinding harder than ever as the senior account manager at one of the most competitive marketing firms in the city. My boss was Nathan, charismatic enough to charm clients into million-dollar contracts, charming enough to make you forget he was about to stab you in the back. But underneath that polished exterior lived a snake who would strike without warning when it served his purposes. We used to be equals, Nathan and I. We started at the company within months of each other, fresh out of business school with matching ambition and complementary skills. We would grab coffee together between meetings, strategize about client presentations, and celebrate each other's wins like true teammates. I genuinely considered him a friend, maybe even my closest ally in the corporate jungle we navigated daily. But when he became team lead, I noticed the subtle shifts that should have been red flags. He stopped inviting me to strategy meetings where my accounts were discussed. He would forget to CC me on emails that directly impacted my projects. He reassigned my accounts without warning, claiming it was for better team balance. Each slight felt like a paper cut, small enough to ignore individually, but collectively bleeding me dry. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I told myself he was adjusting to new responsibilities, that he was under pressure from upper management, that our friendship would weather this temporary storm. I made excuses for him to my husband during dinner conversations, defending behavior that deep down I knew was indefensible. Then came the quarterly review that would shatter my world. Nathan sat across from me in the sterile conference room, his expression carefully neutral as he delivered words that would haunt me for months. He looked me directly in the eyes and said with calculated coldness, "You are doing okay, Jenna. But let us be real here. You will be on leave soon. We need someone who is all in, someone who can give 100% to these accounts without distraction." The word distraction hit me like a physical blow. My hand instinctively moved to my growing belly, protecting the life inside from his verbal assault. I was 7 months pregnant, visibly showing, and undeniably vulnerable in that moment. Nathan, I have never let my pregnancy affect my work performance, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. My clients are happy, my numbers are strong, and I have already arranged coverage for my maternity leave. He leaned back in his chair with that smug expression I had learned to despise. It is not about what you have done, Jenna. It is about what you cannot do moving forward. These accounts need someone who can travel at a moment's notice, work late nights, be available for weekend crisis management. Can you honestly tell me you will be that person with a newborn at home? 2 weeks later, I was let go. They claimed it was department restructuring, a necessary reduction in force due to budget constraints. The human resources representative who delivered the news could not look me in the eye as she spoke. She handed me a severance package that felt more like hush money and walked me to the door with the kind of sympathy that makes you feel like a charity case. And just like that, at 7 months pregnant, I was unemployed while Nathan got my accounts, my budget, and my team. He inherited everything I had built while I faced an uncertain future with a baby on the way. But what Nathan did not know was this. You cannot underestimate a woman in nesting mode. You cannot predict what a mother will do when her security is threatened. You cannot comprehend the fury that burns in a woman who has been underestimated and cast aside. After giving birth to my daughter Luna, I did what every sleepless mom does at 2 in the morning when the house is quiet and the baby is finally sleeping. I started building something. Not just for me, but for her. Not just for survival, but for triumph. It started small. A simple website built during those surreal early morning hours when exhaustion and determination blur together. A few business cards printed on my home printer. Cold emails sent between diaper changes and feeding sessions. I was running on 3 hours of sleep and pure spite, but I was running nonetheless. The first client came through a former colleague who had always respected my work. She needed help with a product launch her current agency was botching, and she remembered my attention to detail. That single project led to another, then another. Word began to spread through the industry network I had cultivated over years of relationship building. By Luna's 6-month birthday, I was no longer freelancing. I was running a boutique agency with 3 employees and a client roster that would make my former company jealous. By her first birthday, I was hiring account managers and creative directors who had heard about the pregnant woman who got fired and built something better. And then, the perfect email arrived in my inbox like a gift from the universe. We would like to explore a merger opportunity, or perhaps a leadership position for you, if you are interested. We have been following your company's growth with great interest, and believe there could be significant synergy between our organizations. It was from Nathan's company. The same company that had discarded me like yesterday's newspaper was now courting me like a prized recruit. Turns out, Nathan's numbers had tanked spectacularly after I left. The clients who had loved working with me were not impressed with his leadership style. 3 major accounts had jumped ship within 6 months, taking their million-dollar budgets with them. The board was asking uncomfortable questions about retention rates and client satisfaction scores. But the final cherry on top of this delicious irony? Nathan was going on paternity leave for his second child. The same man who had questioned my ability to balance motherhood and career was about to discover firsthand what that balancing act actually entailed. Guess who they wanted as interim VP of strategy? I walked back into the same office where he had once dismissed me with such casual cruelty. Same team members who had watched me get escorted out were now standing when I entered the conference room. Same floor, same elevator, same coffee machine in the break room. But this time everything was different because I was different. I spent my first week in the role conducting individual meetings with every team member. I listened to their concerns, their ideas, their frustrations with the current structure. I discovered that Nathan's leadership style had created a culture of fear and competition that was destroying morale and creativity. The brilliant analyst Anika, who Nathan had consistently talked over in meetings, had been passed over for promotion 3 times despite her exceptional work. She sat in my office with tears streaming down her face as she told me about the ideas she had pitched that were dismissed, the credit she had not received, the potential she felt was being wasted. I have been thinking about leaving, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I love the work, but I do not feel valued here anymore. I handed her a tissue and leaned forward in my chair. Anika, I have been reviewing your portfolio, and your work is exceptional. I want to offer you the promotion to senior analyst that you should have received months ago, along with a salary increase and your own team to manage. She cried in my office. I cried with her. We cried together for all the women who had been overlooked, undervalued, and underestimated in corporate environments that claimed to support diversity while practicing discrimination. I restructured the department for real this time, not as a cost-cutting measure, but as a genuine reorganization designed to maximize talent and potential. I created mentorship programs, implemented flexible work arrangements, and established clear paths for advancement based on merit rather than politics. 2 weeks later, Nathan returned from his paternity leave to find a transformed workplace. His old office had been converted into a collaborative workspace. His new office was smaller, with a smaller desk and a view of the parking lot instead of the city skyline. He had to apply to stay on as a consultant. The man who had once held my professional fate in his hands now needed my approval to keep his job. He filled out the application with the same careful attention to detail I had once brought to my work under his supervision. When I offered him the position, he actually thanked me. Standing in my office, looking tired and humbled by new parenthood, he said, "Jenna, I want to apologize for how I treated you. I was wrong, and I am grateful for this opportunity." I sent the offer letter with a note that read, "Welcome to the flexible workplace you once denied me. I hope you find the work-life balance you will need as a new parent." I did not just get justice. I built it brick by brick during late-night nursing sessions and early morning strategy calls. I constructed it while burping a baby and running payroll, while managing client expectations and managing my own exhaustion. Because when someone tries to cut your career short, you have two choices. You can crawl back, hat in hand, begging for scraps of the respect you once commanded. Or you can climb higher, build something better, and make sure every door behind you stays wide open for the women who will follow in your footsteps. I chose to climb. I chose to build. I chose to prove that underestimating a determined woman is the most expensive mistake a company can make. The agency I built from my kitchen table now occupies 2 floors of a downtown high-rise. The team I assembled includes some of the most talented professionals in the industry, many of whom had been overlooked or undervalued in their previous positions. We have won awards, exceeded revenue projections, and most importantly, created a culture where talent is recognized regardless of gender, parental status, or personal circumstances. Luna is now 3 years old, and she comes to the office sometimes on weekends when I need to catch up on work. She has her own little desk in my office where she colors while I review presentations. She thinks everyone works in a place where women are in charge, where mothers are respected, where balance is not just a buzzword but a lived reality. Nathan still works as a consultant, and he is actually quite good at it. He has learned to collaborate rather than dominate, to listen rather than dismiss, to support rather than sabotage. Parenthood changed him in ways that professional development never could. He now understands what I was trying to tell him in that conference room years ago. That being a parent does not make you less capable, it makes you more efficient, more focused, more determined to succeed. Anika now runs her own division, and has been promoted twice since I gave her that first opportunity. She speaks at industry conferences about workplace equality, and serves as a mentor to young women entering the field. She keeps a photo on her desk from the day she got her first promotion, both of us with tears in our eyes and hope in our hearts. The company that once discarded me has become a model for how businesses can support working parents without sacrificing excellence. We offer flexible schedules, comprehensive parental leave, on-site childcare, and advancement opportunities that do not penalize people for having families. Our retention rates are the highest in the industry, and our client satisfaction scores consistently exceed industry benchmarks. But beyond the business success, beyond the revenue growth and industry recognition, the real victory is in the culture we have created. It is in the young mother who does not have to choose between her career and her family. It is in the analyst who knows her ideas will be heard and valued. It is in the consultant who has learned that strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. Every morning when I walk into my office, I pass the conference room where Nathan once told me I would not be all in. I think about that woman who sat there 7 months pregnant, feeling defeated and discarded. I wish I could go back and tell her what I know now. That sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you ever do. The firing that felt like an ending was actually a beginning. The discrimination that seemed like a dead end was actually a detour that led to something far better than I had ever imagined. The boss who tried to limit my potential became the unwitting architect of my success. Today, I am not just a senior account manager fighting for recognition in someone else's company. I am a CEO who has built something lasting, something meaningful, something that will outlive any single project or client relationship. I am a mother who has shown her daughter that women can be powerful, that setbacks can become comebacks, that justice sometimes takes time but it always arrives. And I am a woman who learned that when someone tries to make you smaller, you do not shrink to fit their expectations. You expand beyond their comprehension. You build something so impressive, so undeniable, so successful that they have no choice but to acknowledge what they foolishly tried to dismiss. The sweetest revenge is not just proving them wrong. It is proving that their limitations never applied to you in the first place. It is showing them what they could have had if they had chosen to support you instead of sabotage you. It is becoming everything they feared you could become, and then some. Nathan thought he was protecting his company from the distraction of a pregnant employee. Instead, he created his biggest competitor. He thought he was securing his own position by eliminating potential threats. Instead, he created his own boss. He thought he was making a smart business decision based on outdated assumptions about working mothers. Instead, he learned that the most dangerous person to underestimate is a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The industry that once questioned whether I could balance motherhood and career advancement now studies our company as a model for how to do both successfully. The clients who were reassigned from my accounts now compete to work with my agency. The colleagues who watched me get escorted out now apply to work for the company I built from scratch. This is what happens when you bet against a woman who refuses to be counted out. This is what happens when you mistake pregnancy for weakness instead of recognizing it as strength. This is what happens when you try to close doors that were meant to be opened. When you try to build walls that were meant to be bridges. I did not just get my job back. I got something better. I got my power back. I got my voice back. I got my future back. And I made sure that every woman who comes after me will have doors wide open, bridges already built, and a path already carved toward the success they deserve. Because when someone tries to cut your career short, you do not crawl back. You climb higher. You build better. You prove that their limitations were never yours to accept. You show them what they lost when they chose to let you go. And you make sure that mistake never happens again. Not to you, not to anyone. The woman who walked out of that office 7 months pregnant and devastated by betrayal is not the same woman who walked back in as interim VP of strategy. She is stronger, smarter, more determined, and absolutely unstoppable. She is everything they were afraid she would become, and she is just getting started. This is my story. This is my victory. This is my proof that sometimes the best revenge is not just success, but the kind of success that changes everything for everyone who comes after you. And to everyone watching this story, remember, they can fire you, but they cannot fire your potential. They can dismiss you, but they cannot dismiss your worth. They can underestimate you, but they cannot stop you from proving them wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Your career is not in their hands. Your future is not their decision. Your success is not their permission to grant. It is yours to build. Yours to claim, yours to use as a ladder for the next woman who needs to climb. So do not just get even. Get everything. Get the life you deserve, the recognition you have earned, and the power you were always meant to wield. And when you do, make sure every door behind you stays wide open for the women who will follow in your footsteps. Because that is not just revenge. That is revolution. If this story inspired you to never give up on your dreams despite workplace discrimination, please subscribe to our channel for more stories of triumph over adversity. Hit that notification bell to be the first to hear about women who turned their biggest setbacks into their greatest comebacks. Your subscription helps us share these powerful stories with others who need to hear them. Together, we can create a world where every woman's potential is recognized, respected, and rewarded. They say lightning never strikes twice in the same place. But heartbreak? Heartbreak has a way of finding you exactly where you thought you were safe. My name is Elena. I am 36 years old. And this is the story of how I went from being the family outcast to becoming everything I never knew I wanted to be. It started with a choice that shattered every expectation my family had ever placed on my shoulders. I decided I did not want children. Not because I despised them. Not because I feared them. But because I loved my life exactly as it was. I loved waking up on Saturday mornings to absolute silence. I loved traveling to Paris on a whim. I loved my career as a graphic designer, staying up until 3 in the morning perfecting a project that set my soul on fire. I loved reading entire novels in one sitting without interruption. I loved my small apartment with white walls and breakable things positioned exactly where I wanted them. But most of all, I loved the completeness I felt in my own skin. I was whole. I was enough. I was happy. The world, however, had other plans for my happiness. Every family gathering became a battlefield. Every holiday dinner turned into an interrogation. Aunts would corner me in kitchens, asking when I would settle down and start a real family. Uncles would joke about my biological clock ticking. Grandparents would sigh dramatically and wonder aloud who would take care of me when I was old. But the cruelest voice in this chorus of judgment belonged to my cousin Sabrina. Sabrina was 2 years younger than me, but she carried herself like she had unlocked the greatest secret of the universe. She had her first baby at 21, and from that moment forward, she appointed herself as the spokesperson for real womanhood. At every family gathering, she would find me, like a heat-seeking missile programmed to destroy my peace of mind. "Elena, honey," she would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You know you are missing out on the greatest joy a woman can experience, right?" I would smile politely and change the subject. "I mean, you can pretend to be fulfilled all you want," she would continue. "But you will never truly understand love until you hear your baby call you mommy for the first time." My jaw would clench, but I would remain silent. "And honestly," she would add, delivering the final blow with surgical precision, "you cannot be a real woman without giving life. That is what we were made for. Everything else is just playing pretend." The room would go quiet. Everyone would stare at their plates. And I would excuse myself to the bathroom, where I would grip the sink and remind myself that I did not owe anyone my womb. Least of all her. This went on for years. Sabrina would parade her growing family like trophies. Each pregnancy announcement accompanied by pointed looks in my direction. She had 3 children by the time she was 28, and each birth was followed by passive-aggressive comments about my selfishness and emptiness. I learned to arrive late to family events and leave early. I learned to deflect questions with humor. I learned to build walls around my heart so thick that her words could not penetrate them. But I never learned to stop caring. Because despite everything, I loved those children. I loved Sabrina's oldest daughter, Maya, with her wild curls and infectious giggle. I loved watching her discover the world, asking a million questions about everything from butterflies to why the sky was blue. I loved buying her books and watching her eyes light up when I read to her in funny voices. Maya was 4 years old when everything changed. It was a Tuesday in October when Sabrina called our Aunt Ruth, saying she had a job interview and needed someone to watch Maya for a few hours. Nothing unusual. Sabrina had been struggling financially since her latest boyfriend left, and she often relied on family for childcare. "I will be back by dinner," she promised. "Just a quick interview downtown." But dinner came and went. So did breakfast the next morning. And lunch. And another dinner. Aunt Ruth called Sabrina's phone over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. She drove to Sabrina's apartment, but the landlord said she had not been home in days. She called every number she could think of, but no one had seen or heard from her. By the 3rd day, panic set in. By the 5th day, Aunt Ruth called Child Protective Services. "I do not know what else to do," she cried to me over the phone. "I am 73 years old. I cannot run after a 4-year-old. My arthritis is getting worse, and I am scared I will not be able to keep her safe. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Not just for Maya, but for the helplessness in my aunt's voice, for the weight of responsibility that had been thrust upon shoulders too frail to carry it. That is when I got the call that changed everything. "Elena," the social worker said, her voice professional but kind, "we need to place Maya in kinship care while we continue searching for her mother. Your aunt mentioned you might be able to help. Would you be willing to take her in? Just temporarily, until we can locate Sabrina or find a more permanent solution." The words hit me like a physical blow. Me, the woman who had spent years defending her choice to remain child-free? The woman who had been called selfish and incomplete and broken? I started, then stopped. "I need to think about it." But even as I said the words, I knew there was no thinking required. There was only love. And Maya needed love more than she needed my carefully constructed life plan. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Yes, I will take her." Maya arrived on a Thursday afternoon that felt like the end of the world, and the beginning of something I could not yet name. She stood in my doorway clutching a backpack with no zipper, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Her hair was matted, her clothes were too small, and she smelled like she had not had a proper bath in days. "Hi, Maya," I said, kneeling down to her level. "Do you remember me? I am your cousin Elena." She nodded slowly, her bottom lip trembling. "You are going to stay with me for a while, okay? Until we find your mommy." "Where is she?" Maya whispered, her voice so small it broke my heart. "I do not know, sweetheart. But I promise you are safe here. I promise I will take care of you." I had no idea what I was doing. I had no crib, no toys, no idea how to braid hair or make mac and cheese from a box. I had never changed a diaper or negotiated with a tantruming toddler, or sung lullabies. But I had something else. I had arms that could hold her. I had a heart that could love her. And I had a determination that surprised even me. That first night, Maya cried herself to sleep in my bed while I sat beside her, stroking her hair and whispering that everything would be okay. I did not sleep at all. I just watched her tiny chest rise and fall, marveling at how something so small could completely reorganize my entire existence. The next morning, I found a drawing on my kitchen table. It was a stick figure holding hands with a smaller stick figure. At the bottom, in wobbly 4-year-old handwriting, it said, "Me and Mom." I stared at that drawing for a long time, tears streaming down my face, because I realized that while I had been busy defending my choice not to have children, life had been quietly preparing me for this moment. All those years of loving Maya from a distance, all those bedtime stories and silly voices, all that love I had been storing up without even knowing it. The days that followed were a blur of bureaucracy and heartbreak. Social workers visited. Police officers asked questions. Missing person reports were filed. And through it all, Maya and I learned how to be a family. I enrolled her in preschool and learned how to pack lunch boxes with notes that said, "Have a great day, princess." I figured out how to braid her wild curls and bought every hair tie in the store. I discovered that she loved pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, and that she was afraid of the dark, but brave enough to sleep with just a nightlight. I taught her how to swim in the community pool, holding her tiny body as she kicked her legs and laughed with pure joy. I showed her how to plant flowers in pots on my balcony, watching her eyes widen with wonder as she learned that seeds could become something beautiful with enough love and patience. Most importantly, I taught her that she was worth staying for, that she was worth changing everything for, that she was worth love, period. Weeks turned into months. Still no word from Sabrina. The police had leads that went nowhere. Social services had questions but no answers. And Maya began to bloom like a flower that had finally found the right soil. She started calling me Lenny because Elena was too hard to say. Then it became Mama Lenny, when she was feeling especially affectionate. And finally, one day at the grocery store, she tugged on my sleeve and said, "Mama, can we get ice cream?" The woman in line behind us smiled and said, "Your daughter is adorable." And I did not correct her, because somewhere along the way, without biology or birthing or any of the traditional markers of motherhood, I had become exactly that. A mother. Not because I had given birth, but because I had chosen to stay, because I had chosen to love, because I had chosen her. The court hearings were a nightmare of legal jargon and emotional testimony. I applied for kinship care, which meant I could officially become Maya's guardian while they continued searching for Sabrina. It meant stability for Maya. It meant security. It meant that for the first time in her young life, she could count on someone not disappearing. But it also meant that I had to face the truth I had been avoiding. I was no longer the child-free woman I had once been. I was a mother. And I was good at it. Maya thrived in ways that took my breath away. She learned to read before she turned 5. She made friends at school who came over for playdates. She drew pictures of our little family and hung them on the refrigerator like any other kid. She learned to trust that when I said I would pick her up from school, I would be there. That when I said I loved her, I meant it. That when I said I would never leave her, it was a promise I intended to keep. And then 1 year and 4 months after she had disappeared, Sabrina came back. I was making dinner when I heard the knock. Maya was in the living room, building a fort out of couch cushions and singing to herself. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening in our extraordinary life. I opened the door and there she was. Sabrina. Thin in a way that spoke of missed meals and poor choices. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale, her hair limp. But it was her expression that stopped me cold. The entitled expectation. The assumption that she could simply waltz back into our lives and reclaim what she had abandoned. I am here for Maya, she said, like she was picking up dry cleaning. Sabrina. My voice was steady, but my heart was racing. Where have you been? That does not matter now. I am back. I am ready to take her. Ready. As if readiness was something you could just decide to have after leaving your child with virtual strangers for over a year. Maya. I called softly. Someone is here to see you. She came running, her face bright with curiosity. But when she saw Sabrina, she stopped dead in her tracks. Her smile faded. Her small body moved closer to mine. Hi, baby, Sabrina said, her voice artificially bright. Mommy is back. Are you ready to come home? Maya looked up at me with eyes that held more wisdom than any 5-year-old should have. Then she looked back at Sabrina. I do not want to go with that lady, she whispered. That lady. Not Mom. Not Mommy. Not even Sabrina. Just that lady. I watched Sabrina's face crumble. I watched her realize that in her absence, she had become a stranger to her own child. That love is not a switch you can turn on and off. That motherhood is not a title you can abandon and reclaim at will. Maya, sweetie, Sabrina tried again, kneeling down. I am your mom. Remember? I used to read you stories and... Mama Lenny reads me stories, Maya interrupted, her small hand finding mine. She makes funny voices and she does not leave. The words hung in the air like a verdict. I could have gloated. I could have rubbed salt in the wound. I could have reminded Sabrina of all the times she had called me incomplete, selfish, broken. All the times she had insisted that I could never understand real love, because I had never given birth. Instead, I stepped aside and let her see what her daughter had become in her absence. Maya was confident now, joyful, safe, loved in a way that showed in every movement, every smile, every fearless leap into my arms. She was thriving not because she had been forgotten, but because she had been chosen. Every single day. We can set up supervised visits, I said quietly. I would never try to erase you from her life. You are her biological mother, and that matters. But I will not hand her over to someone who treated her like an inconvenience. She deserves better than that. Sabrina's eyes filled with tears. She is my daughter. No, I said, my voice gentle but firm. She is your child. But I am her mother. There is a difference. And then I said the thing that had been building in my chest for years. The thing that came out not as a weapon, but as a simple truth. You told me I could never be a real woman because I did not give birth. You said I would never understand love until I heard my baby call me mommy. Turns out I did not have to give birth. She chose me anyway. And I chose her back. That is what real love looks like. Sabrina left that night without another word. But she came back the next week. And the week after that. Slowly, carefully, we began to build something new. Not the family we had planned, but the family we had become. Maya saw Sabrina for supervised visits twice a week. She called her Sabrina now, not Mom. It was hard for everyone, but it was honest. And honestly, it was what Maya needed. As the months passed, I made another decision that would have shocked the old Elena. I decided to adopt again. Not because I felt incomplete. Not because society expected it. But because I had learned something profound about love. It multiplies. It does not divide. And there were other children out there who needed what I had discovered I could give. Her name was Sophia. She was 6 months old when she came to me through the foster system. Abandoned at the hospital. Born to a mother who could not care for her. She was tiny and perfect and absolutely mine from the moment I held her. Maya was ecstatic. She helped me feed Sophia bottles and sang lullabies in her wobbly 5-year-old voice. She drew pictures of our family that now included 3 stick figures. Me, her, and baby Sophia. We are a real family now, she told me one day. And I realized she was right. We were. Not because of biology or traditional definitions, but because of choice. Because of love. Because of the decision to stay when staying was hard and to love when love was scary. Today, Maya is 7 years old. She calls me Mom in public and Mama Lenny when she is feeling silly. She is in 2nd grade and reads at a 4th grade level. She has friends and hobbies and dreams of becoming a veterinarian because she loves animals. She is confident and joyful and secure in the knowledge that she is loved unconditionally. Sophia is 18 months old now. She has Maya's curls and my stubbornness and the sweetest laugh I have ever heard. She calls me Mama and Maya Sissy, and thinks the world revolves around the two of us. Which, in our little corner of the universe, it does. Sabrina still sees Maya twice a week. She is clean now, working a steady job, trying to rebuild her life. She will never be Maya's mother in the way that matters most, but she is finding her own way to love her daughter. And that is enough. As for me, I am no longer the child-free woman I once was. But I am not a different person either. I am simply the fullest version of myself. The version that was always there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. People ask me sometimes how I went from being adamantly child-free to being a mother of 2. They want to know if I regret my earlier choices. If I wish I had started sooner. If I feel like I was lying to myself all those years. And I tell them the truth. I was never really child-free. I was just waiting for the right children to find me. Because motherhood is not about biology. It is not about pregnancy or childbirth or genetic connections. It is about showing up. Every day. Even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. It is about choosing love over convenience. About choosing sacrifice over selfishness. About choosing to stay when every instinct tells you to run. It is about becoming someone you never knew you could be because someone else needed you to be exactly that. Maya still keeps that first drawing she made, the one of the stick figures holding hands. But now it sits in a frame on her bedroom wall, surrounded by dozens of other drawings that tell the story of how we became a family. How love found us when we least expected it. How choosing each other saved us all. And when people ask me why a child-free woman now has 2 children, I just smile and say, because love does not ask how you got here. It just asks, will you stay? And I did. I stayed. Through sleepless nights and tantrums and first days of school and scraped knees and bedtime stories and all the beautiful, terrifying, wonderful moments that make up a life. I stayed through the fear that I was not enough. Through the doubt that I could do this. Through the moments when I questioned everything I thought I knew about myself. I stayed because love asked me to. Because Maya needed me to. Because Sophia needed me to. Because I needed me to. And that made all the difference. Not just for them, but for me. Because in becoming their mother, I discovered who I was meant to be all along. Not the woman who could not have children, but the woman who was waiting for the right children to choose her. The woman who learned that sometimes the most beautiful families are not born, but built. Not planned, but found. Not expected, but chosen. The woman who learned that love is not about biology. It is about biology. It is about showing up. It is about staying. It is about choosing each other, again and again, until choosing becomes as natural as breathing. And in the end, that is what family really is. Not the people you share DNA with, but the people you choose to love. The people who choose to love you back. The people who stay when staying is hard and love when love is scary and choose each other every single day. That is what Maya taught me. That is what Sophia taught me. That is what love taught me. And I am grateful for every single lesson. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of love, family, and the unexpected ways our lives can change. Your support helps us share these important stories with the world. Thank you for being part of our community. I never thought my 2 a.m. breakdown would become a viral sensation. Until my best friend of 7 years decided to monetize my misery. My name is Tessa Blake, and I never intended to be a podcaster. In fact, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have laughed and said I hated the sound of my own voice. Back then, I was just trying to survive a painful breakup and rebuild my life quietly. Emphasis on quietly. The breakup had shattered me in ways I could not have imagined. 3 years with someone who made me believe I was not enough, not smart enough, not beautiful enough, not worthy enough. When he finally walked away, I felt like I was drowning in an ocean of self-doubt and heartbreak. I confided everything in one person. Harper, my best friend since freshman year of college. She was my 2 a.m. lifeline, my secrets keeper, my voice note vault. I sent her hours of voice messages. Sometimes sobbing in my car after another sleepless night, sometimes ranting in my kitchen while stress-eating ice cream at midnight, and sometimes just whispering things I had never dared say out loud. The voice notes became my therapy. In those raw, unfiltered moments, I poured out my soul to Harper. I talked about my deepest insecurities, my fears of never being loved, my struggle with self-worth. I shared intimate details about my relationship, my family trauma, my career anxieties, everything that made me human, vulnerable, and real. Harper always replied with supportive messages like, "You are so raw and real. You should be a speaker or something." She would send back heart emojis and tell me how brave I was for sharing my truth. I trusted her completely. She was my safe space, my confidant, my sister from another mother. What I did not know was that she had been saving every single one of those voice notes. Every sob, every whisper, every moment of vulnerability I had shared in confidence. She was collecting my pain like trophies, storing my secrets like ammunition. The betrayal came like a sucker punch on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I was scrolling through TikTok during my coffee break when I saw it. A random account had posted a soundbite, me, crying and saying in a voice cracked with emotion, "Sometimes I wonder if I was ever really loved, or if I was just convenient until something better came along." My blood turned to ice. The voice was unmistakable. My most vulnerable moment, my deepest fear, played for the entertainment of strangers. The video hit 1 million views overnight. The caption read, "When she still does not get why he left skull skull skull," followed by laughing emojis and cruel comments from thousands of people who did not know me but felt entitled to judge my pain. I watched in horror as people dissected my heartbreak, made memes out of my misery, and turned my tears into their entertainment. Some comments were supportive, but most were ruthless. "Girl, get some therapy. This is why he left. Imagine being this desperate." Each word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The username behind the post was anonymous, but when I downloaded the audio file, I noticed something that made my heart sink. The file name contained Harper's initials, HM_Tessa Breakdown March 15.mp3. She had not only saved my voice note, but had labeled it with clinical precision. My hands were shaking as I called her. My voice was barely above a whisper when I asked, "Harper, did you post my voice note on TikTok?" There was a long pause. Then, a cold laugh that I had never heard from her before. "Which one?" she asked, as if she had posted multiple. "The one where I am crying about being loved," I said, my voice breaking. "Harper, how could you do this to me?" Her response was a shrug I could hear through the phone and a cruel smirk in her voice. "It is not like I tagged you. No one knows it is you unless you tell them." I was speechless. This was the person I had trusted with my deepest secrets, my most vulnerable moments. This was the friend who had held my hand through panic attacks, who had listened to me cry for hours, who had promised that my secrets were safe with her. But Harper, those were private. I trusted you. I shared those with you, because I thought you cared about me. "Oh please," she said with an irritation that shocked me. "You have been trauma dumping on me for months. At least now I am getting something out of it." The video has almost 2 million views. I might actually make some money from this. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. The betrayal cut deeper than any romantic heartbreak I had ever experienced. This was not just about my privacy being violated. It was about my trust being shattered by someone I had considered family. I spent 2 days in shock, replaying every conversation we had ever had, wondering if she had been planning this betrayal all along. I spent 2 weeks in fury, alternating between wanting to expose her and wanting to disappear from the world completely. I considered changing my name, moving to another city, starting over where no one knew about my viral breakdown. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the hundreds of messages I received from people who had seen the video and related to my pain. Maybe it was the realization that Harper had actually done me a favor by showing me her true colors. Or maybe it was just the stubborn part of me that refused to let her win. I decided to take back control of my narrative. If my voice was going to be out there, it would be on my terms. I spent 2 months planning, learning, and building something she could never take down. I researched podcasting, studied successful shows, and most importantly, I started listening to my own voice notes with new ears. What Harper had seen as weakness, I began to see as strength. What she had used as ammunition, I would use as armor. I launched a podcast called The Voicemail Diaries. The tagline was simple: an anonymous woman's journey through heartbreak, self-worth, trauma, and ultimately revenge. I chose to remain anonymous, not out of shame, but out of power. I wanted people to focus on the message, not the messenger. My first episode was bold. I started with the exact voice note that Harper had leaked, but this time, I owned it completely. I followed it with commentary, reflections, humor, and music. I analyzed my own pain with the wisdom I had gained through months of healing. I added context that Harper had stripped away, humanity that she had ignored. "This is me," I said in that first episode. At my lowest point, wondering if I was ever really loved. But here is what I want you to know about this moment. It was not pathetic. It was human. It was real. And it was mine to share, not someone else's to exploit. I talked about the betrayal, about Harper's actions, with just the tiniest bleep over her name. But if you listen carefully, you could still make it out. I was not trying to hide what she had done. I was trying to show the world what real friendship looked like by contrasting it with what she had shown me. Each week, I dropped another note from my vault, not as shame, but as storytelling. I took my rawest moments and transformed them into lessons, into hope, into connection. It was not messy anymore. It was magic. The show started small, but it grew quickly. People connected with the authenticity, the vulnerability, the way I could take pain and turn it into something beautiful. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. "This is the therapy I did not know I needed. You are helping me through my own breakup. Thank you for being so real." Within 3 months, we had crossed 1 million downloads. Spotify noticed and featured us on their new and noteworthy playlist. Apple Podcasts put us in their Shows We Love section. A producer from a women's media company reached out and said, "This feels like therapy for the whole internet. We want to help you take it to the next level." The show blew up beyond my wildest dreams. We hit #1 in the mental health category in 12 countries. I got invited to speak at storytelling conferences, women's empowerment events, and digital media panels. People wrote in saying the episodes had saved them from bad relationships, helped them recognize red flags, and given them the courage to leave toxic situations. The most incredible part was how the show evolved. What started as my personal healing journey became a platform for other women to share their stories. I began featuring guest voice notes from listeners who wanted to share their own experiences with betrayal, heartbreak, and healing. The show became a community, a safe space, a place where vulnerability was celebrated rather than exploited. But I never forgot what Harper had done. Every episode was partly for the women who were listening, but also partly for her. I knew she was out there, hearing her betrayal referenced in every show, watching me succeed using the very pain she had tried to profit from. Then came the cherry on top. An email that made me scream with joy in my apartment. The Voicemail Diaries had been nominated for Best Narrative Podcast 2025 at the Audio Content Awards. I had gone from viral victim to award-nominated creator in less than a year. The night of the awards ceremony, I walked the red carpet in a blood-red dress that made me feel like a warrior. Reporters asked me about my journey, and I told them the truth. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. When they called my name as the winner, I walked to that stage with my head held high. My acceptance speech was short but powerful. Thank you to the woman who leaked my voice notes. You tried to silence me by exploiting my vulnerability. Instead, you helped me find my voice, and now, I use it for millions of people who need to hear that their pain matters, their stories matter, and their voices matter. The audience gave me a standing ovation. I looked out at the crowd and felt something I had not felt in years: pride. Not just in my success, but in my resilience, my ability to transform poison into medicine. After the ceremony, I went home and recorded a special episode. I talked about the awards night, about how far I had come, about the community we had built together. I ended with a message that I knew Harper would hear. To the person who thought they could profit from my pain: thank you. You taught me that some people will try to monetize your misery, but you also taught me that I have the power to take that misery and turn it into something meaningful. You thought you were taking my voice. Instead, you helped me find it. I have not spoken to Harper since that phone call over a year ago, but I know she is listening. I can see in my analytics that someone from her city downloads every episode within minutes of it being posted. She follows the show's social media accounts from a burner account that I recognize from the language patterns in the few comments she has left. She hears herself referenced in every episode one drop. She knows that her betrayal became the foundation of my success. She watches me thrive using the very vulnerability she tried to weaponize. And now she is the one who has been silenced, not by me but by her own actions. People in our old social circle know what she did. They have distanced themselves from her. She lost not just me, but several other friends who realized they could not trust someone who would betray a friend's deepest secrets for internet clout. The irony is perfect. She thought she was stealing my voice, but she actually helped me find it. She thought she was profiting from my pain, but she actually helped me turn that pain into purpose. She thought she was humiliating me, but she actually launched me into a career I never knew I wanted. As for me, I still record voice notes, but these days they are for the world, not just for one person. They come with an intro jingle that gives me chills every time I hear it. This is the Voicemail Diaries, because even whispers have power. The show has become my life's work. I have expanded it into a network of podcasts, focusing on different aspects of women's experiences. I have written a book deal based on the show. I have launched workshops teaching people how to turn their trauma into storytelling. I have created a scholarship fund for women who want to pursue careers in audio storytelling. But more than the professional success, I have found something I did not even know I was looking for. My authentic voice. Not the voice I used to please others, not the voice I used to minimize my own pain, but the voice that speaks truth, that demands respect, that refuses to be silenced. Every day, I get messages from women who tell me that my story gave them the courage to leave toxic relationships, to set boundaries with friends, to value their own privacy and trust. I get voice notes from listeners sharing their own stories of betrayal and healing. I get emails from therapists who recommend my show to their clients. The ripple effect of Harper's betrayal has been massive, but not in the way she intended. Instead of destroying me, it launched me. Instead of silencing me, it amplified my voice. Instead of profiting from my pain, she helped me turn that pain into a platform that helps millions of people. Sometimes late at night, when I am editing the next episode or responding to listener messages, I think about that scared, broken girl who sent hours of voice notes to someone she thought was her friend. I wish I could go back and tell her that her pain was not pathetic, that her vulnerability was not weakness, that her story was not something to be ashamed of. But I cannot go back. All I can do is move forward, using my voice to create the safe space I wish I had had during my darkest moments. All I can do is turn my whispers into roars, my secrets into stories, my pain into power. The Voicemail Diaries continues to grow, continues to heal, continues to inspire. And Harper? She is still out there, listening to every episode, watching me succeed, knowing that her betrayal became the foundation of my empire. In the end, she did not steal my voice. She helped me find it. And now millions of people around the world get to hear it every week. That is the power of taking back your narrative. That is the magic of turning your pain into purpose. That is what happens when you refuse to let someone else's betrayal define your story. My voice notes are no longer whispered in shame. They are broadcast with pride. They are shared with love. They are heard with respect. And that, my friends, is the sweetest revenge of all. If this story touched your heart or inspired you in any way, please consider subscribing to our channel. They say that spring is the season of new beginnings. But for me, spring was the season that shattered everything I thought I knew about love, about life, and about the man I was supposed to marry. I am Elena Pierce. I was 34 years old when my world collapsed in the span of 2 weeks. 2 weeks that would change everything I believed about myself, about the people I trusted, and about what I was truly capable of becoming. This is not just a story about loss. This is not just another tale of heartbreak and betrayal. This is the story of how I took the most devastating pain of my life and transformed it into something so powerful that the man who destroyed me now has to witness my success every single day. But let me start at the beginning, because every ending needs its proper beginning. I met Mark when I was 29. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Successful, charming, confident in that way that made me feel safe and protected. He had this ability to make me feel like I was the only woman in the room, like I was special, chosen, worthy of his attention. We dated for 3 years before he proposed. 3 years of what I thought was building something beautiful together. 3 years of shared dreams, late-night conversations about our future, about the family we would create, about growing old together. The proposal was perfect. He took me to the same restaurant where we had our first date, got down on one knee right there in front of everyone, and asked me to be his wife with tears in his eyes. I said yes without hesitation because I could not imagine my life without him. We set the date for spring, April 23rd, to be exact. I had my dress picked out, the venue booked, the flowers ordered. Everything was falling into place like pieces of a perfect puzzle. But life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. In January, I discovered I was pregnant. We were not trying to conceive. We had talked about children, of course, but our plan was to wait until after the wedding, to have a year or two as just husband and wife before expanding our family. But when I saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, my heart filled with a joy I had never experienced before. I was terrified to tell Mark. Not because I thought he would be angry, but because I was afraid he might think I had planned this, that I was trying to trap him or rush him into something he was not ready for. When I finally worked up the courage to show him the test, his reaction was better than I could have hoped for. He swept me up in his arms, spun me around the kitchen, and whispered in my ear that this was the best surprise he had ever gotten. "We are going to be parents," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Our baby is going to be born in the fall. A little autumn baby." We spent the next few weeks planning and dreaming. We talked about names, about nursery colors, about whether the baby would have my eyes or his smile. Mark became protective in the sweetest way, constantly asking how I was feeling, making sure I was taking my prenatal vitamins, researching the best doctors in the area. For 6 beautiful weeks, we were not just a couple planning a wedding. We were a family preparing for our future. But at my 8-week appointment, the world stopped. I will never forget the look on the ultrasound technician's face. The way she went quiet, the way she excused herself to get the doctor. The way the doctor came in with that practiced expression of gentle sympathy that I would later learn was reserved for delivering the worst possible news. "I am so sorry," she said, and those 4 words shattered everything. "There is no heartbeat." The baby stopped developing around 6 weeks. A missed miscarriage, she called it. My body had not even realized yet that the pregnancy was no longer viable. I was still experiencing all the symptoms, still feeling pregnant, still carrying hope in my heart while my baby had already been gone for 2 weeks. The next few days were a blur of medical procedures and physical pain. But the emotional devastation was so much worse than anything my body was going through. I felt like I was drowning in grief, suffocating under the weight of a loss I could not even properly explain to people. Mark was supportive at first. He held me while I cried. He took time off work to be with me during the medical procedures. He told me that everything would be okay, that we would try again when I was ready. But as days turned into weeks, something changed. I could not stop crying. Every commercial with a baby, every pregnant woman I saw at the grocery store, every baby shower invitation that arrived in the mail sent me into a spiral of grief that felt endless and overwhelming. I found myself unable to focus on our wedding planning, unable to pretend that everything was normal when nothing felt normal anymore. Mark started to get impatient. "You need to move on," he said one evening when he found me crying in the nursery we had started to plan. "This is not healthy, Elena. You are obsessing over something that was never really real." Never really real. Those words cut deeper than any physical pain I had experienced during the miscarriage. How could he say that about our baby? About the life we had created together? The future we had dreamed about? The love I had felt growing inside me? It was real to me. I whispered, but he had already walked away. Things got worse after that. Mark started working late more often, finding excuses to avoid coming home to my grief. When he was home, he would get frustrated with my tears, with my need to talk about what we had lost, with my inability to just bounce back and pretend everything was fine. "You are being too emotional," he said during one particularly awful fight. "I lost the baby too, but I am not falling apart. I am trying to be strong for both of us, but you are not meeting me halfway." Too emotional. As if grief had a proper timeline. As if there was a right way to process the loss of a child. As if my tears were somehow a character flaw, rather than a natural response to devastating loss. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being too emotional. Maybe I was being selfish, wallowing in my pain instead of thinking about how this was affecting him too. Maybe I needed to be stronger, to pull myself together, to focus on our future instead of mourning what we had lost. But every time I tried to push down my grief, it came back stronger. Every time I pretended to be okay for his sake, the pain built up inside me until it felt like it might explode. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning in March. I woke up to find an envelope on the kitchen counter. My name was written on it in Mark's handwriting, but he was nowhere to be found. His side of the bed was cold, his clothes were gone from the closet, and his car was not in the driveway. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was my engagement ring and a note that said simply, "I just cannot do this anymore. I am sorry." That was it. No explanation. No conversation. No chance to fight for our relationship or try to work through our problems together. Just a ring and a note, and the devastating realization that the man I had loved, the man I had trusted with my heart and my future, had abandoned me in my darkest hour. I collapsed on the kitchen floor and sobbed until I had no tears left. The pain was so intense it felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart. I had lost my baby, my fiancé, my future, and my sense of self all in the span of a few months. For weeks, I barely functioned. I called in sick to work, ignored calls from friends and family, and spent most of my time in bed staring at the ceiling and wondering how I was supposed to rebuild a life that felt completely destroyed. But slowly, very slowly, something began to shift inside me. The grief was still there, would always be there. But alongside it, anger began to grow. Anger at Mark for abandoning me. Anger at a healthcare system that had provided so little support during my loss. Anger at a world that seemed to dismiss women's pain as too emotional, or not that serious. I started to research. I learned that miscarriage affects 1 in 4 pregnancies, but it is rarely talked about openly. I discovered that many women suffer in silence, feeling isolated and alone in their grief because society treats pregnancy loss as something private, something shameful, something that should be gotten over quickly and quietly. I found online support groups where women shared their stories, their pain, their frustration with medical professionals who dismissed their concerns or offered platitudes instead of real support. I read about women who had been told they were too emotional for wanting to grieve their losses, who had been made to feel like their pain was not valid or important. And I realized that my pain was not just personal. It was systemic. It was the result of a culture that does not value women's reproductive health, that does not provide adequate support for maternal grief, that expects women to suffer in silence and bounce back quickly from devastating losses. That realization became the spark that ignited my purpose. I decided to go back to school. At 34, I enrolled in a graduate program in women's health and reproductive medicine. It was terrifying to start over, to sit in classrooms with people 10 years younger than me, to struggle with coursework while still processing my own trauma. But for the first time since my miscarriage, I felt like I had direction. I felt like my pain might actually serve a purpose. My classmates and professors were incredibly supportive. Many of them had their own stories of loss, their own experiences with inadequate healthcare, their own motivation for entering the field. I found a community of women who understood that emotional responses to reproductive trauma were not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be channeled into advocacy and change. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that surprised even me. I learned about the latest research in reproductive health, about innovative treatment approaches, about the importance of comprehensive care that addresses not just physical symptoms, but emotional and psychological needs as well. During my second year, I started developing a business plan for a women's health clinic that would provide the kind of holistic, compassionate care I had wished for during my own loss. I researched funding options, applied for grants, and began networking with other healthcare professionals who shared my vision. It was during this process that I learned Mark was engaged again. To a woman named Sarah, someone he had met at work just 3 months after he left me. They were planning a fall wedding, almost exactly 2 years after the date that was supposed to be ours. The news stung, but not in the way I expected. I was not devastated by the thought of him moving on. I was angry that he had been able to move on so easily, that my grief had been such a burden to him while his own recovery had been so swift and uncomplicated. But I used that anger as fuel. I worked even harder on my business plan, spent even more time studying, pushed myself even further toward my goal of opening a clinic that would provide the kind of support I had needed and never received. 2 years after that devastating spring, I graduated with honors and secured enough funding to open my clinic. I found the perfect location, hired an amazing team of healthcare professionals, and began the process of turning my vision into reality. The location I chose was not accidental. It was in Mark's neighborhood, just 3 blocks from the house where we had lived together, where I had planned our wedding, where I had grieved our baby alone. I did not choose it out of spite, exactly. It was simply the best location available, in a part of town that needed more women's healthcare options, with the right kind of space and the right kind of foot traffic. But I would be lying if I said it did not feel satisfying to put down roots in the place where he had abandoned me. I named the clinic The Haven, because I wanted it to be exactly that, a safe harbor for women navigating the stormy waters of reproductive health challenges. A place where their emotions would be validated, where their pain would be taken seriously, where they would never be told they were too emotional, or that their grief was not real. The grand opening was incredible. Local news stations covered the story, highlighting our innovative approach to women's health and our commitment to providing comprehensive care. The mayor cut the ribbon. Healthcare professionals from across the region came to tour our facilities. And Mark was there, standing across the street with a look of shock and something that might have been pride or regret on his face. Our eyes met for just a moment. I did not smile or wave or acknowledge him in any way. I simply turned back to the cameras and continued with my interviews, talking about the importance of supporting women through reproductive health challenges and the need for more compassionate, comprehensive care. Within the first month, we were booked solid. Women came from all over the region seeking the kind of care we provided. We offered not just medical treatment, but counseling, support groups, educational workshops, and resources for partners and families. Many of our patients were dealing with miscarriage, infertility, or other reproductive health challenges. But we also provided routine gynecological care, contraceptive counseling, and reproductive health education. We became known as the place where women could come to be heard, to be believed, to be cared for with dignity and respect. 3 months after we opened, a woman named Sarah made an appointment for a fertility consultation. Sarah Turner, Mark's new wife. She did not know who I was when she walked into my office. She had simply heard that the Haven was the best women's health clinic in the area, that we had excellent success rates with fertility treatments, that our approach was more holistic and supportive than other clinics. I could have referred her to one of my colleagues. I could have found an excuse to avoid treating her personally. But I am a professional, and she was a patient in need of care. Sarah was struggling with infertility. She and Mark had been trying to conceive for over a year with no success. She was frustrated, scared, and feeling like her body was failing her. She was also feeling dismissed by her previous healthcare providers, who had suggested she was too anxious and needed to just relax. Sound familiar? As I listened to her story, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was still pain there, still anger about how Mark had treated me. But there was also professional compassion for a woman who was struggling with the same kind of dismissive medical care that had failed me. I provided Sarah with comprehensive fertility testing, a thorough evaluation of her reproductive health, and a treatment plan that addressed both her physical and emotional needs. I connected her with our counseling services and support groups. I made sure she felt heard and validated every step of the way. During one of our appointments, she mentioned that her husband had been in a previous relationship with someone who had experienced pregnancy loss. He does not like to talk about it, she said. I think it was really hard for him. He said she became really emotional and could not handle the stress. I guess some people just are not strong enough to deal with that kind of loss. I kept my expression neutral and professional, but inside I was seething. Mark had rewritten our history, painting me as the weak one who could not handle stress, rather than acknowledging his own inability to support me through grief. Pregnancy loss can be very difficult for everyone involved, I said carefully. Different people process grief in different ways, and it is important to have supportive partners and healthcare providers during such challenging times. Sarah nodded, but I could see she had absorbed Mark's narrative about emotional weakness and strength. Over the following months, I treated Sarah with the same level of care and professionalism I provided to all my patients. We adjusted her treatment plan, provided additional support, and eventually, she became pregnant. The irony was not lost on me. The woman who had married the man who abandoned me during my pregnancy loss was now receiving the kind of comprehensive, compassionate care that might have made a difference in my own journey. But that is the thing about being a healthcare provider. You provide care to everyone who needs it, regardless of your personal history with them. You put your professional ethics above your personal feelings. You choose healing over revenge, every single time. Sarah's pregnancy progressed normally, and she delivered a healthy baby girl. She sent me a thank you card with a photo of her daughter, expressing gratitude for the care she had received at the Haven. She also left us a glowing review online, recommending our clinic to other women struggling with fertility issues. She began referring her friends to us. She started following our social media pages and sharing our posts about women's health advocacy. In the 2 years since the Haven opened, we have helped over 1,200 women. We have provided fertility treatments, pregnancy loss support, routine gynecological care, and comprehensive reproductive health education. We have become a resource not just for medical treatment, but for advocacy and policy change. I have been invited to speak at medical conferences about our innovative approach to women's health. I have testified before state legislative committees about the need for better support for pregnancy loss. I have been featured in national magazines as an example of how personal trauma can be transformed into professional purpose. And Mark has had to watch all of this unfold in his own neighborhood. He walks past our clinic every day on his way to work. He sees our billboard on his morning commute. He hears people in his social circle talking about the Haven, about the incredible work we are doing, about the woman who founded it after her own devastating loss. He knows that his wife depends on the clinic I built. He knows that the woman he called too emotional channeled those emotions into something that has helped over 1,000 women. He knows that the grief he could not handle became the foundation for a legacy that will outlast anything he will ever accomplish. I do not need him to apologize anymore. I do not need him to acknowledge what he did to me or take responsibility for how he handled my grief. I do not need his validation or his regret, because I have something much more powerful than an apology. I have proof that my emotions were not too much. I have evidence that my grief was not weakness. I have built something meaningful from the ashes of what he destroyed. Every day, women come to the Haven and tell me their stories. Stories of loss, of dismissal, of being told they are too emotional or too sensitive or too demanding. Stories of healthcare providers who do not listen, partners who do not understand, systems that fail them when they need support most. And every day, I get to look these women in the eye and tell them that their emotions are valid, that their grief is real, that their pain deserves to be heard and treated with compassion and respect. The clinic has become more than just a healthcare facility. It has become a symbol of what is possible when women refuse to accept dismissal and inadequate care. It has become a testament to the power of transforming pain into purpose, of turning personal trauma into professional mission. I lost a baby in the spring of 2019. I lost a fiancé who was supposed to love me through the hardest moments of my life. I lost my faith in the man I trusted most, and I lost my sense of security in the world. But I found something else. I found my voice. I found my purpose. I found the strength to build something meaningful from the pieces of my broken heart. The Haven is more than just my clinic. It is my legacy. It is proof that the woman Mark called too emotional was actually exactly emotional enough to change the world for women like me. And every morning, when Mark walks past my billboard on his way to work, he is reminded that the biggest mistake of his life was not staying to fight for our relationship. It was underestimating what I was capable of when I decided to fight for myself. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who has been broken and decided to rebuild herself into something unbreakable. There is nothing more dangerous than a woman who has been told she is too much and decides to become everything she was always meant to be. I am Elena Pierce. I am the founder of The Haven. I am the woman who turned her worst heartbreak into her greatest triumph. And I am just getting started. If this story inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience, transformation, and women who refuse to let their pain define them. Your support helps us share these powerful narratives that remind us all what we are capable of when we choose to rise above our circumstances. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of survivors who became thrivers. They laughed when she called me too sensitive, in front of the entire team. They said I would never get promoted because I take everything personally. What they did not know was that I was already building a case that would change everything. 1 year later, she sits across from my desk every Monday morning, fidgeting and over-explaining, while I calmly take notes as her new boss. My name is Maya Brooks, and this is the story of how I turned my greatest weakness into my most powerful weapon. I was 35 years old, working in a mid-sized tech company where the air itself seemed to crackle with unspoken tensions and barely concealed hostility. The building was sleek and modern, with its glass walls and open-concept design that was supposed to promote collaboration. Instead, it created a fishbowl where every interaction was scrutinized, every vulnerability exposed. I worked in the engineering department, surrounded by a sea of polo shirts and khakis, where I was one of only 3 women among 27 employees. The numbers alone should have told me everything I needed to know about what I was walking into. But I had been so grateful to land the job that I convinced myself the gender imbalance was just a coincidence. How naive I was. From my first day, I noticed the subtle ways I was made to feel like an outsider. The inside jokes that stopped when I walked into the room. The way my suggestions were ignored in meetings, only to be praised when a male colleague repeated them verbatim 10 minutes later. The casual comments about my appearance, my voice, my reactions to things that should have been unacceptable to anyone with basic human decency. But I was the only one who ever dared to speak up about these uncomfortable realities. When someone made a joke about women being bad at math, I was the one who pointed out how inappropriate it was. When emails were sent with language that was clearly passive-aggressive and designed to undermine, I was the one who called attention to the hostile tone. When team banter crossed the line from playful to cruel, I was the one who suggested we maintain some level of professionalism. They called it just office culture. I called it exhausting. Every single day felt like I was swimming upstream against a current of normalized toxicity. I would wake up in the morning with a knot in my stomach, wondering what fresh hell awaited me at work. Would it be another harmless comment about my emotional state? Another meeting where my input was dismissed without consideration? Another day of feeling like I was slowly disappearing, becoming invisible in my own workplace? But the worst part was not the individual incidents themselves. It was the way they accumulated, day after day, week after week, until I began to question my own sanity. Was I really being too sensitive? Was I imagining the hostility? Was I the problem? That was exactly what they wanted me to think. And then there was Dana. Dana was the queen bee of corporate gaslighting, a woman in her 40s who had somehow climbed the ladder by perfecting the art of making other people feel small. She had this way of speaking that sounded professional and reasonable on the surface, but underneath, every word was carefully chosen to cut and wound. She was the type of person who would smile sweetly while delivering the most devastating critique of your work. She would frame her cruelty as constructive feedback, and her manipulation as team building. She had mastered the art of making you feel grateful for her abuse, as if she was doing you a favor by pointing out all the ways you were failing. Dana had been with the company for 8 years, and she had built a reputation as someone who got things done. What people did not see was how she got things done. By systematically destroying the confidence and morale of anyone who might pose a threat to her position. I became her favorite target. It started small, as these things always do. A comment here and there about my emotional responses to feedback. A subtle eye roll when I shared an idea in a meeting. A way of speaking to me that was just patronizing enough to make me feel stupid, but not obvious enough for anyone else to notice. But Dana was not content with subtle psychological warfare. She needed an audience for her cruelty, and she found the perfect opportunity during our weekly team meeting in March. We were discussing the timeline for a major project, and there had been some confusion about the deliverables. I had been working on a critical component for weeks, and I was concerned that the unrealistic deadline was going to compromise the quality of the final product. I raised my hand and spoke up about my concerns, trying to be diplomatic but honest about the challenges we were facing. I understand we want to move quickly, I said, but I think we need to be realistic about what we can accomplish without sacrificing quality. The current timeline does not account for proper testing, and I am worried we are setting ourselves up for failure. The room fell silent. I could feel the tension in the air, the way people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My manager, Brad, looked annoyed, as if I had just disrupted his carefully laid plans with my inconvenient reality check. And then Dana spoke. "Maya," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "You are always so sensitive about these things. This is why you will never get promoted. You take everything personally instead of just focusing on solutions." The words hit me like a physical blow, not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. The tone was so condescending, so dismissive, so designed to make me feel like a child who had spoken out of turn. But worse than Dana's words was the reaction from everyone else in the room. They laughed. Not loud, cruel laughter, but those uncomfortable chuckles that people make when they are witnessing something they know is wrong but do not have the courage to speak up about it. The kind of laughter that says better you than me, and thank God I am not the target. Even my manager laughed. Brad actually laughed at his employee being publicly humiliated and having her professional competence questioned. He laughed as if Dana's cruelty was just another form of office entertainment. I sat there, my face burning with shame and anger, feeling like the entire room was spinning around me. I wanted to defend myself, to point out that caring about quality was not the same as being sensitive, to explain that I was not taking anything personally but was simply trying to do my job well. But I could not find the words. I could not find my voice. I just sat there, nodding along as if I agreed with her assessment, as if I was grateful for her feedback, as if I was not dying inside. The meeting continued as if nothing had happened. They moved on to other topics, other discussions, other business. I sat there for the remaining 30 minutes, my mind reeling, my hands shaking under the table, my heart pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. When the meeting finally ended, I walked back to my desk on unsteady legs. I sat down, stared at my computer screen, and tried to process what had just happened. I had been professionally humiliated in front of my entire team, and no one had said a word in my defense. That was when I realized I had two choices. I could let Dana's words define me. I could accept that I was too sensitive, and that my sensitivity was a weakness that would forever hold me back. I could shrink into myself, become smaller and quieter, until I eventually disappeared entirely, or I could do something about it. I chose to fight, but I was not going to fight the way they expected me to fight. I was not going to have a dramatic confrontation or make a scene in the office. I was not going to stoop to their level of petty cruelty and passive-aggressive manipulation. I was going to fight smart. First, I went to HR. I made an appointment with Jessica, the head of human resources, a woman in her 50s who had been with the company for over a decade. I had always assumed that HR was supposed to be on the side of the employees, that they were there to protect people like me from exactly this kind of treatment. I was wrong. Jessica listened to my story with a polite smile, nodding at appropriate intervals, and making sympathetic noises. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her handwriting neat and professional. When I finished explaining what had happened, she set down her pen and looked at me with what I can only describe as practiced empathy. "I am so sorry you had that experience, Maya," she said. "That must have been very uncomfortable for you." I waited for her to continue, to tell me what steps she was going to take, what investigation she was going to launch, what consequences Dana was going to face for her behavior. Instead, she said, "I think what would be most helpful here is if I had a conversation with Dana about communication styles and team dynamics. Sometimes these things are just a matter of different personalities clashing, and we can work through it with some mediation." Different personalities clashing. As if professional bullying was just a personality quirk that could be smoothed over with a friendly chat. I pressed her for more specifics. What exactly was she going to say to Dana? What was going to prevent this from happening again? What protections were in place for employees who were being systematically undermined by their colleagues? Jessica's smile became more strained. "Maya, I appreciate your passion about this, but I think you might be overthinking the situation. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just move forward and focus on creating positive interactions going forward." Move forward. Focus on positive interactions. The corporate equivalent of boys will be boys. I left that meeting feeling more alone and helpless than I had felt in years. Not only was I being bullied at work, but the people who were supposed to protect me were actively enabling my tormentors. That night, I went home to my small apartment and sat on my couch, staring at the wall. I could feel the familiar spiral of self-doubt beginning to take hold. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just how the working world operated, and I needed to develop thicker skin. But then I remembered the look on Dana's face when she had said those words. The satisfaction in her eyes. The way she had savored my humiliation like a fine wine. And I remembered something else. I was not the first person Dana had targeted. Over the years, I had watched her systematically destroy the confidence of other colleagues, particularly women and younger employees. There had been Sarah, the bright young analyst who had transferred to another department after 6 months of Dana's mentorship. There had been Jennifer, the project manager who had eventually quit after Dana had publicly questioned her competence one too many times. I was not the first, and I would not be the last, unless I did something about it. The next morning, I started documenting everything. I created a detailed spreadsheet with dates, times, witnesses, and exact quotes. I saved every email that contained inappropriate language or passive-aggressive undertones. I noted every instance of being excluded from meetings or having my contributions dismissed. I recorded every microaggression, every subtle put-down, every moment when I was made to feel less than. But I was careful. I did not want anyone to know what I was doing, because I knew that if word got out, I would become an even bigger target. I worked on my documentation at home, on my personal computer, during my own time. At the same time, I began studying organizational culture with the intensity of a graduate student preparing for comprehensive exams. I read books on leadership psychology, emotional intelligence, and conflict management. I took online courses in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I studied the legal framework around workplace harassment and discrimination. I learned about the concept of psychological safety and how it was essential for high-performing teams. I read about the business case for inclusive leadership and the measurable impact of toxic workplace cultures on productivity, retention, and innovation. I discovered that my sensitivity was not a weakness at all. It was a superpower. My ability to notice subtle dynamics, to pick up on emotional undercurrents, to understand how people's behavior affected others. These were not character flaws. They were exactly the skills that organizations needed to create healthy, productive work environments. I was not too sensitive for the workplace. The workplace was not sensitive enough. As I continued my research, I began to understand the bigger picture of what was happening at our company. The high turnover rate, particularly among women and people of color. The low engagement scores on our annual employee satisfaction surveys. The way talented people seemed to leave just as they were hitting their stride. It was not a coincidence. It was a pattern. And patterns could be changed. I spent months building my case, collecting evidence, and developing solutions. I created detailed reports on the current state of our workplace culture, identifying specific problem areas and proposing concrete interventions. I researched best practices from other companies that had successfully transformed their cultures. I developed training programs, policy recommendations, and measurement frameworks. I did all of this while continuing to do my regular job, continuing to endure Dana's subtle cruelty, continuing to smile politely while she chipped away at my confidence week after week. But I was no longer the same person who had sat silently in that meeting, accepting her judgment about my sensitivity. I was building something bigger than my own hurt feelings. I was creating a roadmap for change. The opportunity came in January, almost a year after that devastating team meeting. Our company had been struggling with retention issues, and our latest employee engagement survey had revealed some uncomfortable truths about our workplace culture. The results were so bad that they had gotten the attention of our CEO, Michael Chun, who was known for his focus on data-driven decision-making. In response, Michael announced a new initiative called the Culture and Leadership Revamp, designed to address the systemic issues that were driving talented people away from our organization. As part of this initiative, he was creating a new position, Head of Culture and Ethics. The job description was everything I had been preparing for. The role would be responsible for auditing and restructuring team dynamics, developing and implementing cultural change initiatives, and ensuring that all employees feel valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work. It was as if someone had taken my secret research and turned it into a job posting. I applied immediately, but I was not content to simply submit a resume and hope for the best. I knew that this was my one chance to turn everything around, and I was going to make it count. I prepared for those interviews like my life depended on it, because in many ways it did. I created a comprehensive presentation that laid out the current state of our workplace culture, complete with data, trends, and specific examples of how our toxic environment was impacting business results. I had charts showing the correlation between our low engagement scores and our high turnover rates. I had graphs demonstrating the financial cost of constantly recruiting and training new employees. But I did not just present problems. I presented solutions. I had a detailed 90-day plan for immediate interventions. I had a 6-month roadmap for systemic change. I had a long-term vision for what our company could become if we committed to creating a truly inclusive, supportive work environment. I had case studies from other organizations that had successfully transformed their cultures. I had research from leading business schools about the competitive advantage of psychologically safe workplaces. I had testimonials from employees at companies that had invested in cultural change initiatives. Most importantly, I had receipts. I had documentation of specific incidents that had occurred in our workplace. I had examples of how our current culture was failing our employees and, by extension, our business. I had evidence of the patterns that were driving people away. I did not name names. I did not point fingers. I simply presented the facts and let the data speak for itself. The interview process was intense. I met with Michael, with the entire leadership team, with representatives from different departments. Each conversation was an opportunity to demonstrate not just my knowledge of organizational psychology, but my understanding of our specific challenges and my vision for addressing them. In one interview, I was asked about my approach to handling resistance to change. I talked about the importance of building coalitions, creating quick wins, and helping people understand how cultural change would benefit them personally. I discussed the need for both top-down leadership and grassroots engagement. In another interview, I was asked about my experience with conflict resolution. I drew on my own experiences being marginalized and dismissed, explaining how I had learned to navigate difficult conversations, and find common ground with people who had very different perspectives. In the final interview, Michael asked me directly why I thought I was the right person for this role. I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. I am the right person for this role because I understand what it feels like to be dismissed and undervalued, I said. I know what it is like to have your contributions ignored and your concerns brushed aside. I know what it is like to feel like you do not belong in your own workplace. I paused, gathering my courage for what I was about to say next. But I also know what it is like to refuse to accept that treatment. I know what it is like to channel your frustration into action, to turn your pain into purpose. I know what it is like to believe that things can be better, even when everyone around you seems content with the status quo. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each person on the interview panel. I am not applying for this role because I think it will be easy. I am applying for this role because I know it will be hard. Because I know that real change requires someone who is willing to ask uncomfortable questions and have difficult conversations. Someone who is willing to challenge the way things have always been done. I smiled, thinking about Dana's words from that team meeting almost a year ago. I have been told that I am too sensitive, that my sensitivity is a weakness. But I have learned that sensitivity is actually a superpower. It is what allows me to notice things that others miss. It is what motivates me to fight for people who cannot fight for themselves. It is what will make me effective in this role. The room was silent for a moment after I finished speaking. I could not read the expressions on their faces, and I wondered if I had been too honest, too vulnerable, too much. Then Michael smiled. Maya, he said, I think you might be exactly what this company needs. 2 weeks later, I got the call. I had gotten the job. The internal announcement went out on a Friday morning, and I will never forget the moment I read it. Please welcome Maya Brooks as our new head of culture and ethics. Maya will be responsible for auditing and restructuring team dynamics, developing cultural change initiatives, and ensuring that all employees feel valued and respected. She will be working closely with leadership to create a workplace where everyone can thrive. I read the announcement 3 times, hardly believing it was real. After years of being told I was too sensitive, too emotional, too much, I was being entrusted with the responsibility of transforming our entire workplace culture. But the real satisfaction came from imagining Dana's reaction when she read that announcement. The first few weeks in my new role were a whirlwind of meetings, assessments, and planning sessions. I was given a budget, a small team, and the authority to make real changes. I was reporting directly to Michael, which meant I had the executive support I needed to implement my vision. One of my first tasks was to restructure the reporting relationships within the organization. As part of this restructuring, I had the authority to determine who would report to whom, based on their roles and responsibilities. When I reviewed the organizational chart, I noticed that Dana's current reporting structure was not aligned with the new cultural initiatives we were implementing. Her role in project management would be much more effective if she reported directly to someone who could provide better oversight and support. Someone like me. I scheduled a meeting with Dana to discuss the new reporting structure. I chose a conference room with large windows and a view of the city, wanting the setting to feel professional and official. When Dana walked into the room, I could see the confusion on her face. She had clearly expected this to be a routine conversation about workflows or procedures. She had no idea what was coming. Dana, I said, gesturing for her to take a seat across from me. I wanted to talk to you about some changes we are making to the organizational structure as part of our cultural transformation initiative. She nodded, still looking puzzled. Effective immediately, you will be reporting directly to me, I continued. We will be having weekly one-on-one meetings every Monday morning to discuss your projects, your professional development, and your contributions to our team culture. I watched as the reality of the situation sank in. The woman who had publicly humiliated me, who had told me I was too sensitive, who had said I would never get promoted, was now going to be reporting to me. To her credit, Dana tried to maintain her composure, but I could see the shock in her eyes. The way her carefully controlled facade cracked just slightly around the edges. I see, she said slowly. And what exactly will these weekly meetings entail? I smiled, the same polite, professional smile that Jessica from HR had given me all those months ago. We will be focusing on active accountability, I said. I know it might feel uncomfortable at first, but I believe it is important for everyone on our team to take ownership of their impact on workplace culture. The irony was not lost on either of us. Our first official one-on-one meeting was scheduled for the following Monday morning. I spent the weekend preparing, reviewing Dana's work history, her interactions with colleagues, and her role in the toxic culture we were working to change. When Monday morning arrived, I was ready. Dana knocked on my office door at exactly 9 o'clock, and I invited her to take a seat. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her notepad and avoiding eye contact. "So," I said, settling into my chair and opening my laptop. "How are you feeling about the new reporting structure?" "Fine," she said quickly. "I am excited to work more closely with you." The words sounded hollow, rehearsed. I could tell she was trying to present herself as enthusiastic and collaborative, but there was an underlying tension in her voice. "That is wonderful to hear," I said. "I want to make sure we get off to a good start, so I thought we could begin by talking about communication styles and team dynamics." I could see her tense up at those words. She knew exactly what I was referring to. "I have been reviewing some of the feedback we have received about team interactions," I continued, "and I think there might be some opportunities for growth in how we communicate with our colleagues." Dana shifted in her seat, her fingers tapping nervously on her notepad. "I am not sure what you mean," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I opened a file on my computer and pulled up some of the documentation I had been collecting over the past year. Not the personal incidents involving me, but the broader pattern of behavior that had been affecting multiple team members. "Let me give you some specific examples," I said, reading from my notes. In the March team meeting, there was an incident where a colleague raised legitimate concerns about project timelines, and the response was to dismiss those concerns by characterizing the person as too sensitive. Dana's face flushed slightly. She knew exactly which incident I was referring to. "That was not," she started to say, then stopped herself. "I know these conversations can be difficult," I said, my voice calm and professional. "But I think it is important for us to examine how our words and actions affect our colleagues. When we dismiss someone's professional concerns by characterizing them as overly emotional, we are not just undermining that individual. We are creating an environment where people feel unsafe to speak up about important issues." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. As leaders in this organization, we have a responsibility to model the kind of communication that fosters trust and collaboration. Does that make sense? Dana nodded reluctantly, but I could see the resistance in her eyes. She was not used to being held accountable for her behavior, and she was not enjoying the experience. "I want to work with you to develop some strategies for more effective communication," I continued. "I think with some intentional effort, we can create much better outcomes for everyone involved." The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with me providing specific feedback and Dana responding with varying degrees of defensiveness and grudging acknowledgement. By the end of the conversation, she looked exhausted, as if the effort of being held accountable was physically draining. "I will see you next Monday," I said as she prepared to leave. "And Dana? Let us stay sensitive to tone in all our interactions this week, shall we?" The words hung in the air between us, and I could see that she understood the message. I was not going to forget what she had said to me. I was not going to pretend that it had never happened. But I was also not going to let it consume me with bitterness and resentment. Instead, I was going to use it as a teaching moment. Week after week, Dana and I continued our Monday morning meetings. Each conversation was an opportunity to address the toxic behaviors that had been normalized in our workplace for far too long. I gave her feedback on her communication style, her treatment of colleagues, and her contribution to team dynamics. Sometimes she pushed back, trying to minimize her behavior or shift blame to others. But I was prepared for that. I had documentation, examples, and a clear framework for what acceptable behavior looked like. Other times, she seemed genuinely surprised by the impact of her actions, as if she had never considered how her words might affect other people. Those moments gave me hope that real change was possible, even for someone who had been so deeply entrenched in toxic patterns. Gradually, I began to see shifts in her behavior. She was more careful with her words in team meetings. She was more collaborative in her interactions with colleagues. She was less quick to dismiss other people's ideas or concerns. It was not a complete transformation, and it did not happen overnight. But it was progress. More importantly, the changes were not limited to Dana. As word spread about the new culture initiatives, other employees began to feel empowered to speak up about their own experiences. People who had been silently enduring toxic behavior for years suddenly had a safe space to report problems and seek support. I created anonymous feedback systems, regular culture surveys, and open office hours where people could come to me with concerns. I developed training programs on inclusive leadership, unconscious bias, and psychological safety. I worked with managers to help them understand how their behavior affected their teams. The transformation was not just about punishment or consequences. It was about education, support, and creating new systems that would prevent toxic behavior from taking root in the first place. 6 months into my new role, I received an email that made me cry. It was from Sarah, the young analyst who had transferred to another department after enduring months of Dana's mentorship. She had heard about the culture changes that were happening and wanted to share her story. Maya, she wrote, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for what you are doing. When I was working with Dana, I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was the problem. I ended up leaving the team because I could not handle the constant criticism and undermining. But now I understand that it was not about me. It was about a toxic culture that nobody was willing to address. She went on to say that she was considering transferring back to our department, now that she felt confident that things had changed. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up, she concluded. Thank you for turning your pain into purpose. You are making a difference for people like me who did not have the strength to fight back. I read that email 3 times, tears streaming down my face. This was why I had endured all those months of documentation and preparation. This was why I had refused to let Dana's words define me. This was why I had chosen to fight smart instead of giving up. A year after starting my new role, I was asked to present our culture transformation results to the board of directors. The numbers were impressive. Employee engagement scores had increased by 40%, turnover had decreased by 30%, and our company had been recognized as one of the best places to work in our industry. But the statistics that mattered most to me were the personal ones. The number of employees who felt safe to speak up about problems. The number of people who said they felt valued and respected at work. The number of individuals who were thriving in an environment where their sensitivity was seen as a strength rather than a weakness. As I stood in front of the boardroom, presenting the results of our cultural transformation, I thought about that team meeting where Dana had publicly humiliated me. I thought about how small and powerless I had felt in that moment. How convinced I had been that I was the problem. I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The months of documentation, the countless hours of research, the courage it had taken to apply for a role that seemed impossible to attain. And I thought about Dana, who was now one of my most improved team members, who had learned to check her behavior and consider the impact of her words on others. After my presentation, Michael approached me in the hallway. Maya, he said, I have to ask you something. What made you so passionate about this work? What drove you to develop such a comprehensive understanding of organizational culture? I smiled, thinking about how to answer that question honestly. Someone once told me that I was too sensitive. I said. They said it was a weakness that would hold me back. But I realized that sensitivity is not a weakness at all. It is the ability to notice things that others miss. It is the capacity to care about people who are struggling. It is the motivation to fight for change when everyone else is content with the status quo. I paused, looking out the window at the city skyline. I learned that the world does not need fewer sensitive people. The world needs more workplaces that are worthy of our sensitivity. Today, 2 years after that devastating team meeting, I am proud to say that our company has become one of those workplaces. We have created an environment where people feel safe to be themselves, where diverse perspectives are valued, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Dana still works for our company, and she still reports to me. But our relationship has evolved into something I never could have imagined. She has become one of my most reliable team members, someone who actively works to promote the kind of inclusive culture we have built together. Last month, she approached me after one of our team meetings. Maya, she said, I owe you an apology. Not just for what I said to you that day, but for all the ways I made you feel unwelcome and undervalued. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about what sensitivity means. And I am grateful that you did not give up on me. I accepted her apology, because forgiveness is also part of creating a healthy workplace culture. But I also made it clear that the real measure of her growth would be how she treated the next person who dared to speak up about something uncomfortable. As I write this story, I want to address everyone who has ever been told they are too sensitive for the workplace. Everyone who has been made to feel that their emotional intelligence is a liability rather than an asset. Everyone who has been dismissed, undermined, or marginalized because they dared to notice and name toxic behavior. You are not too sensitive. You are exactly as sensitive as the world needs you to be. Your ability to notice subtle dynamics, to care about people who are hurting, to speak up when something is wrong. These are not character flaws. These are superpowers. Do not let anyone convince you to make yourself smaller to fit into a broken system. Instead, use your sensitivity as a force for change. Document what you observe. Study what you want to see instead. Build the case for the workplace you believe is possible. And remember that sometimes the best revenge is not getting even. Sometimes the best revenge is getting promoted. Your sensitivity is not your weakness. It is your strength. And the world needs more leaders who understand the difference. Please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of workplace transformation and personal empowerment. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives of resilience and change. The tears fell like rain on my pillow for 3 consecutive nights. But let me tell you something about rock bottom. It makes an excellent foundation for building something extraordinary. My name is Clara Whitmore, and this is the story of how I transformed my deepest wounds into my greatest weapons. I was 33 when I met Ethan, a financial analyst with perfectly pressed shirts and a smile that could disarm nuclear weapons. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, like every word you spoke was poetry worth memorizing. In those early days, he would trace circles on my back as we lay in bed, whispering about how much he admired my strength, how he had never met someone so resilient, how my layers made me fascinating. You are like a rare vintage wine, he would say, his breath warm against my ear. Complex. Aged by experience. Absolutely intoxicating. But here is the thing about men who fall in love with your strength. They often run when they discover what it actually cost you to build it. I had survived a childhood that would have broken weaker spirits. Parents who viewed children as burdens rather than blessings. A divorce that left me financially devastated and emotionally shattered. Years of rebuilding myself from nothing, piece by painful piece. I did not parade my trauma around like a badge of honor, but I did not hide it either. When you have walked through hell and emerged with your dignity intact, you learn that shame is a luxury you cannot afford. For almost a year, Ethan seemed to understand this. He would hold me when the nightmares came. He would listen when I needed to process something difficult. He made me believe that my past was not a burden but a testament to my incredible capacity for survival. But people change. Or maybe they just reveal who they really were all along. The shift began when I started talking about therapy. Real therapy. The kind where you dig deep into the wounds that shaped you and learn to heal them properly. I wanted to build a future with vulnerability and honesty as the foundation. That is when I watched the man I loved begin to disappear. Suddenly, our conversations felt strained. He would check his phone when I spoke about anything meaningful. He started making excuses to avoid spending time together. The warmth in his eyes was replaced by something that looked disturbingly like irritation. "You are so heavy lately," he said one evening as we walked through the park where we had shared our first kiss. "Everything with you is so intense." I felt my heart crack, but I pushed forward. "I am working on healing, Ethan. I thought you wanted me to be healthy." "I do," he said quickly. "But does it have to be so much? So complicated?" The word complicated hit me like a physical blow. I had spent my entire life being told I was too much, too emotional, too damaged, too difficult to love. But the worst was yet to come. It happened on a Tuesday night in his apartment. The one with the minimalist decor and the perfect lighting that made everything look like a magazine spread. We were sharing a bottle of wine, and I was telling him about a breakthrough I had experienced in therapy. He set down his glass and looked at me with eyes that had already said goodbye. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a death sentence, "I need to be honest with you." My blood turned to ice. "What is it?" "I just do not think I can be with someone who comes with that much baggage." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I felt my soul leave my body. "I want someone light," he continued, each word a knife twist. "Carefree. Someone who does not drain my energy with all this emotional stuff." I sat there in stunned silence, watching the man I loved reduce my entire existence to an inconvenience, to luggage he was not willing to carry. Then he stood up, walked over to where I sat frozen in shock, and kissed my forehead like I was a sad story he was closing the book on. "I hope you understand," he whispered. "I hope you find someone who can handle all of this." And then he walked away. Just like that. I drove home in a daze, pulled into my driveway, and sat in my car for 2 hours, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened, unable to believe that someone who claimed to love me could discard me so easily. When I finally made it inside, I collapsed on my bathroom floor and cried until I had no tears left. Then I cried some more. For 3 days, I was a ghost. I called in sick to work. I ignored my phone. I lived on crackers and tap water, and the crushing weight of rejection. But on the 4th day, something shifted. I woke up angry. Not sad. Not broken. Furious. Who was he to decide that my experiences made me unworthy of love? Who was he to look at my survival and call it baggage? Who was he to make me feel ashamed of the very strength he had once claimed to admire? I got up, showered, and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. And I saw something I had forgotten was there. A fighter. I had survived an abusive childhood. I had rebuilt my life after a devastating divorce. I had turned my pain into purpose, my wounds into wisdom. I was not broken. I was not too much. I was not baggage. I was a goddamn warrior. And warriors do not stay down. I threw myself into healing like my life depended on it. Because it did. I finished my trauma therapy with a vengeance, peeling back every layer of hurt until I reached the core of who I really was. I rebuilt my self-esteem from the ground up, brick by brick, truth by truth. I quit the soul-crushing corporate job that had been slowly killing my spirit. The one where I spent 40 hours a week making other people rich, while my own dreams withered on the vine. Instead, I focused on something that had been my secret passion for years. My side business creating handmade luxury luggage and travel gear. Beautiful, functional pieces that told a story, that carried meaning. I called it Empress and Ivy. Every bag I created had a message stitched inside where only the owner would see it. Your baggage tells your story. Carry it with pride. Those words became my manifesto, my battle cry, my middle finger to everyone who had ever made me feel like my experiences were something to be ashamed of. I worked 18-hour days, pouring my heart and soul into every stitch. I studied luxury brands, learned about materials and craftsmanship, and discovered that I had a natural talent for creating things that were both beautiful and meaningful. The breakthrough came 6 months later. A travel magazine featured my work in an article about luxury luggage with a message. The writer called my pieces, "Therapy disguised as fashion," and "Emotional intelligence you can carry." Orders started pouring in. Real orders. From real people with real money, who understood that quality and meaning were worth paying for. Within a year, I had celebrity clients. Actresses who loved the empowerment message. Business executives who appreciated the craftsmanship. Travelers who wanted their luggage to reflect their journey, not just hold their clothes. And then came the call that changed everything. A luxury airline wanted to collaborate. They wanted me to create an exclusive line for their first-class passengers. Bags that would embody the premium experience they were trying to create. I said yes before they finished the sentence. But the most beautiful part of this transformation was not the business success. It was not the money or the recognition or the validation from strangers. It was Daniel. I met him at a coffee shop 6 months into my business journey. He was a pilot, tall and gentle, with laugh lines around his eyes and hands that looked like they could fix anything. He was reading a book about trauma and resilience when I walked in. When he saw me looking, he smiled and said, "Research for understanding someone special." We started talking, and I braced myself for the inevitable moment when my past would become too much. When he would realize that dating me came with complications he had not signed up for. But that moment never came. Instead, he listened to my story and said, "Thank you for trusting me with that. It explains so much about why you are such an incredible person." He did not try to fix me. He did not treat me like I was broken. He did not flinch when I had bad days, or when old wounds reopened unexpectedly. He just made space for all of me. The light and the dark. The strength and the vulnerability. The triumph and the scars. "Your past does not define you," he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from his balcony. "But it definitely shaped you into someone extraordinary. I would not change a single thing about your journey, because it led you to me." When he proposed, he did it with a custom luggage tag instead of a ring box. The tag read, "Ready for the adventure of a lifetime?" I said yes through tears of joy. We got married in the Maldives. Just 14 guests. No drama. No complications. Just pure, uncomplicated love surrounded by the people who mattered most. The wedding was perfect, but the flight home was where the magic happened. We were flying first class, of course. My business was thriving, and I had learned that treating yourself well is not vanity, it is self-respect. As I sat in that luxury cabin, sipping champagne and watching my new husband sleep peacefully beside me, an idea began to form. A beautiful, petty, absolutely perfect idea. I took out my sketchbook and designed a luggage tag. One of a kind, made from white leather with gold foil lettering. On the front, Mrs. EP. On the back, "Thanks for the baggage." I made it luxury. When we landed, I went straight to my workshop and created it. Every stitch was perfect. Every detail was intentional. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship and barely contained vindication. Then I mailed it to Ethan's apartment. No note. No explanation. Just the tag. Because sometimes the most powerful statements are the ones that speak for themselves. A week later, he messaged me on LinkedIn. "Wow. You really made it, huh? I always knew you had potential." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to unleash years of pent-up fury, to tell him exactly what I thought of his conditional love and his cowardly heart. But I did not reply, because engaging with small minds is a luxury I could no longer afford. Instead, I made sure my next sponsored ad ran on his feed. A photo of me standing on a runway beside my husband, wearing my custom Empress and Ivy carry-on and sunglasses that said, "Too much? Good." The caption read, "Some people are afraid of depth. Others build empires from it. Choose your luggage accordingly." That post went viral. Thousands of women shared their own stories of being told they were too much or carried too much baggage. The comments were filled with stories of transformation, resilience, and the kind of love that does not require you to shrink yourself to fit. My business exploded. Orders came from around the world. Women wanted luggage that celebrated their journeys instead of hiding them. They wanted bags that said, "I survived," instead of "I am sorry." I expanded the line to include purses, briefcases, and travel accessories. Each piece carried the same message. Your story matters. Your experiences have value. Your baggage tells the world that you are strong enough to carry it. The irony was not lost on me. The man who rejected me because of my emotional baggage had inadvertently inspired me to build a luxury luggage empire. His cruelty had become my catalyst. His inability to handle my depth had pushed me to find someone who could swim in my ocean without drowning. But here is what I learned through this entire journey. I never needed Ethan to carry my baggage. I never needed anyone to carry it. I just needed them to respect it. To understand that my scars were not defects but evidence of my strength. That my complexity was not a burden but a gift. That my depth was not something to be feared, but something to be treasured. Daniel understood this from day one. He looked at my luggage and said, "This is beautiful. Show me what is inside." He did not try to lighten my load. He did not suggest I leave anything behind. He simply made sure I knew I would never have to carry it alone. And that, my friends, is the difference between a man who deserves you and one who does not. The man who deserves you will not ask you to pack light. He will not complain about your baggage. He will not make you feel like your experiences are inconveniences. He will help you organize your luggage. He will make sure it has wheels. He will carry the heavy pieces without being asked, and celebrate the beautiful things you have collected along the way. Because the truth is, we all have baggage. We all carry the weight of our experiences, our mistakes, our heartbreaks, our triumphs. The only difference is whether we carry it with shame or with pride. I chose pride. I chose to turn my pain into purpose. I chose to transform my wounds into wisdom. I chose to take the very thing that made me unlovable and turn it into the foundation of my success. Today, Empress and Ivy is a multi-million-dollar company. We have stores in 12 countries and a waiting list for our limited edition pieces. Celebrities carry our bags on red carpets. Business leaders use our briefcases in boardrooms. Travelers around the world carry our luggage with pride. But more than that, we have created a movement. A community of people who refuse to apologize for their journeys. Who understand that their experiences, no matter how painful, are not baggage to be hidden but stories to be honored. I get letters from customers every day. Women who tell me that carrying one of our bags reminds them of their strength. Men who say our message helped them understand their own journey. People who have turned their pain into power and their scars into art. This is what happens when you stop apologizing for taking up space. When you stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. When you stop believing that your depth is a flaw instead of a feature. Ethan was right about one thing. I did come with baggage. But he was wrong about everything else. My baggage was not a burden. It was proof of my resilience. It was evidence of my capacity to survive, to grow, to transform. It was the raw material from which I built an empire. And the man who truly deserved me? He knew how to handle first-class treatment. He knew that some things are worth the extra weight. He knew that depth is not something to be feared, but something to be treasured. As I write this, I am sitting in my home office, surrounded by prototypes for our next collection. Daniel is in the kitchen making dinner, humming off-key the way he always does when he is happy. Our luggage is packed for a trip to Paris, where we will be opening our third European store. My phone buzzes with a notification. Another order. Another person choosing to carry their story with pride instead of shame. I smile and close my laptop. Because this is what victory looks like. Not revenge, not proving someone wrong, but building something beautiful from the ruins of what almost destroyed you. Sometimes the best response to someone who cannot handle your baggage is not to argue with them. It is to pack it beautifully, carry it with pride, and board a flight to somewhere extraordinary. And if they want to know where you went, send them a luggage tag with your new coordinates. Because only people flying coach complain about luggage. The rest of us? We are too busy enjoying the view from first class. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of transformation and triumph. Your support helps us share stories that matter and reminds others that their baggage is not a burden but a badge of honor. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who refuse to apologize for taking up space. I watched my best friend steal my recipe on live television and claim it as her own creation. She won everything I had dreamed of. But what she did not know was that she had just lit a fire that would burn brighter than any kitchen flame. My name is Nina Carter, and this is the story of how betrayal became my greatest teacher. Food has always been my love language. Not just the eating of it, but the creating, the crafting, the careful dance of flavors that happens when you truly understand ingredients. My earliest memories are painted in kitchen scenes. Standing barefoot on a wooden stool beside my grandmother. My tiny hands barely able to grip the wooden spoon as I stirred pots that seemed enormous to my child eyes, but felt just right for my eager soul. Grandma Rose had magic in her fingertips. She could transform the simplest ingredients into something that would make grown men weep with joy. Flour, eggs, butter, and love. That was her recipe for everything. But more than the food itself, she taught me that cooking was about connection. Every dish told a story. Every meal was an act of love. Nina, baby, she would say, her weathered hands guiding mine as we kneaded dough together. Cooking is not just about feeding the body. It is about feeding the soul. When you cook with love, people can taste it. They can feel it in their bones. I carried those words with me through childhood, through college, through my marriage to David, and eventually through my divorce. At 35, I found myself starting over in ways I never imagined. The house David and I had shared for 8 years was gone. The life we had built together was dismantled piece by piece, distributed between lawyers and moving boxes. I ended up in a small apartment across town, with a broken oven that only heated to half its intended temperature, and a refrigerator that hummed so loudly it sounded like a dying whale. But I had my dream. The same dream I had carried since I was that little girl on the wooden stool. To one day write my own cookbook. To share the recipes that lived in my heart, the ones that had been passed down through generations, and the new ones I created in moments of inspiration. Every night after my day job at the insurance office, I would come home and transform my tiny kitchen into a laboratory of flavors. I tested recipes obsessively, adjusting seasonings, trying new techniques, documenting everything in a worn notebook that became my most treasured possession. The pages were stained with flour and splattered with sauce, each mark a testament to another small victory or educational failure. I started filming TikToks of my cooking experiments. Simple videos, me in my pajamas, hair in a messy bun, explaining how to make the perfect scrambled eggs or sharing the story behind my grandmother's cornbread recipe. The videos barely got any views. Maybe 20-30 people would watch. But those few who did always left such kind comments that it kept me going. Your food looks amazing. I tried your recipe and my family loved it. You should have your own cooking show. I would screenshot those comments and save them in a folder on my phone labeled Someday. Because someday I believed things would be different. Someday, I would have the money to take proper culinary courses. Someday, I would have a real kitchen with equipment that worked. Someday I would write that cookbook. But I had one person who believed in me more than I believed in myself. Or so I thought. Her name was Melissa Rodriguez, and she had been my best friend for 10 years. We met at a wine tasting event shortly after I moved to the city, both of us newly single and looking for connection. Melissa was everything I was not: stylish, confident, loud in the best possible way. She was the kind of woman who could walk into any room and immediately become the center of attention. People gravitated toward her like moths to a flame, drawn by her infectious laugh and her ability to make everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. She had a successful career in marketing, a beautiful downtown loft, and a confidence that I envied. But more than that, she seemed to genuinely care about my dreams. When I doubted myself, she would remind me of my potential. When I felt like giving up, she would encourage me to keep going. "Nina, you are incredibly talented," she would say during our weekly brunches. "But talent is not enough. You need packaging. You need presentation. You need someone who knows how to sell the story." We started cooking together on weekends. I would test new dishes while she sipped wine from expensive glasses, snapped photos with her professional camera, and offered advice that always sounded so wise and sophisticated. "You are a genius, Nina," she would say, watching me plate a dish I had spent hours perfecting. "But you need me to package you. You need someone who understands branding, who knows how to present your work to the world." At first, I laughed off her suggestions. Melissa was my friend, not my business partner. But as the months passed, her comments became more frequent, more insistent. She would talk about our recipes, our cooking channel, our future success. I started to feel like she saw potential in me that I could not see in myself. Then one day, she called me with news that made my heart race with excitement and terror. "I signed us up for a food competition show," she announced, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "It is called America's Best Kitchen, and they film live episodes every Sunday." I told them about our cooking partnership, and they want us to compete. I was silent for a long moment, my mind racing. A real cooking competition? On television? It was everything I had dreamed of, but also everything I feared. "Melissa, I do not know if I am ready for something like that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That is exactly why you need me," she replied. "I will handle the presentation, the talking, the camera work. You just handle the food. We will be a team, Nina." This is our chance to show the world what we can do. I hesitated. Something in my gut told me to be careful, but I pushed that feeling aside. Melissa was my best friend. She believed in me when I could not believe in myself. And maybe she was right. Maybe I did need her to help me package my dreams. Okay, I said finally. Let us do it. The weeks leading up to the show were a whirlwind of preparation. We decided to make my signature dish, smoked honey lavender chicken with roasted vegetables and herb-infused rice. It was a recipe that had taken me months to perfect, born from a moment of inspiration when I was walking through a farmer's market and saw the most beautiful lavender bundles I had ever seen. The dish was complex but not complicated. The chicken was brined for 24 hours in a mixture of honey, kosher salt, and fresh herbs. Then it was smoked low and slow until the skin was crispy, and the meat was so tender it practically fell off the bone. The lavender was used sparingly, just enough to add a floral note that complemented the sweetness of the honey without overpowering the dish. I practiced making it over and over, timing every step, adjusting the seasoning until it was absolutely perfect. Melissa watched me work, taking notes, asking questions about techniques and ingredients. She was genuinely interested in the process, and I felt so grateful to have someone who cared about my passion as much as I did. "This dish is incredible, Nina," she said after tasting the final version. "It tells a story. It represents strength and sweetness, resilience and beauty. This is going to win us the competition." The day of the show arrived faster than I expected. The studio was huge and intimidating, with bright lights and cameras everywhere. There were 6 teams competing, each with their own cooking station equipped with professional-grade equipment that made my broken apartment oven look like a toy. I felt like I was going to throw up. "Relax," Melissa said, squeezing my shoulder. "You have got this. Just cook like you always do, and I will take care of everything else." She looked stunning. Her hair was styled in perfect waves, her makeup was flawless, and she wore a crisp white apron that made her look like she had stepped out of a cooking magazine. In contrast, I felt frumpy and nervous in my simple black dress and basic apron. The host introduced all the teams, and when it was our turn, Melissa stepped forward with confidence. "We are Melissa and Nina," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We are here to show you that cooking is not just about food. It is about heart, about story, about transformation." I nodded and smiled, but my throat felt too tight to speak. The competition began, and I threw myself into the cooking. This was my element, my safe space. My hands moved with practiced precision as I prepared the brine, seasoned the chicken, and got the smoker ready. Melissa stood beside me, narrating our process for the cameras, explaining our techniques and our vision. Everything was going perfectly. The chicken was cooking beautifully, the vegetables were roasting to golden perfection, and the rice was absorbing all the herb flavors exactly as it should. I felt proud, accomplished, ready to share my creation with the world. But then something changed. As we got closer to the judging, Melissa started positioning herself differently. She moved to the front of our station, taking over the plating process, speaking to the cameras as if she were the head chef and I were her assistant. "The key to this dish," she explained to the host, "is understanding the balance between sweet and savory, between traditional techniques and modern innovation." I tried to step forward, to add my own voice to the presentation, but Melissa smoothly moved to block me. She smiled at me, but there was something in her eyes that I had never seen before. Something cold and calculating. When the judging began, she presented our dish with the confidence of someone who had created it from scratch. "This is my signature smoked honey lavender chicken," she said, her voice steady and proud. "It is a recipe that came to me after my divorce, during a time when I was learning to rebuild my life. The honey represents the sweetness that can come from bitter experiences, and the lavender represents the beauty that can bloom even after the harshest winters." My heart stopped. Those were my words, my story, my recipe, but she was telling it as if it were her own creation, her own journey, her own triumph. The judges tasted the dish, and their faces lit up with delight. "This is exceptional," said the head judge. "The flavors are perfectly balanced, the technique is flawless, and the story behind it is deeply moving. This is what cooking should be: personal, meaningful, transformative." The audience cheered. The cameras captured every moment of praise. And Melissa stood there, soaking it all in, accepting congratulations for work that was entirely mine. I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body. This could not be happening. This was not real. But it was real. And it got worse. When the winners were announced, Melissa and I took first place. But in her acceptance speech, she barely mentioned me. I want to thank my cooking partner Nina for all her support, she said. As if I were nothing more than a sous chef who had helped her achieve her vision. But mostly, I want to thank my grandmother who taught me that cooking is about love, and my own experiences, which taught me that the best dishes come from the heart. Even my grandmother's wisdom was being claimed as her own. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not cause a scene. I simply stood there, smiling politely, as my best friend accepted a cookbook deal, a brand partnership, and national recognition for work that was entirely mine. When we left the studio, I was numb. Melissa was practically glowing with excitement. "Can you believe it, Nina?" she said, grabbing my hands. "We did it. We actually did it." "You did it," I said quietly. She looked at me with surprise. "What do you mean?" "We are a team." "Are we?" I asked. Because it sounded like you created that recipe all by yourself. For just a moment, her confident facade cracked. I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or shame. But then she smiled again, and it was gone. "Nina, you are being dramatic," she said. "I had to sell the story. I had to make it compelling for the audience. You understand that, right?" I did not understand. I did not understand how someone I trusted could take credit for my work, my story, my heart laid bare on a plate. But I nodded anyway. Because I was too shocked, too hurt, too confused to do anything else. The show aired the following Sunday. I watched from my tiny apartment, sitting on my second-hand couch, eating takeout Chinese food from a container, while my best friend became famous using my recipe. She was interviewed on morning shows. Her picture appeared in food magazines. She signed deals with kitchen equipment companies. She was invited to food festivals and cooking demonstrations. And I went back to my day job at the insurance office, coming home every night to my broken oven and my shattered dreams. For weeks, I felt like I was drowning. I could not eat. I could not sleep. I certainly could not cook. The sight of my kitchen, the smell of herbs and spices, the sound of sizzling pans. Everything reminded me of what I had lost. Friends and family called to congratulate me on the show, but I could not explain what had really happened. How do you tell people that your best friend stole your recipe and claimed it as her own? How do you explain that betrayal without sounding bitter or jealous? So I said nothing. I smiled and thanked them and pretended that everything was fine. But everything was not fine. Everything was broken. One night, about a month after the show aired, I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at the notebook filled with all my recipe ideas. I was thinking about throwing it away, about giving up on cooking entirely, about accepting that maybe I was not meant for this dream. That is when I saw it. A box of matches on my counter, left over from the last time my gas stove had stopped working properly. I picked up the matches and held them in my hand. For a moment, I thought about lighting the notebook on fire, about destroying all the evidence of my foolish dreams. But then I thought about my grandmother, about the lessons she had taught me, about the love she had poured into every dish, every meal, every moment we had shared in her kitchen. Cooking is not just about feeding the body, I whispered, repeating her words. It is about feeding the soul. And I realized that Melissa had not stolen my soul. She had stolen my recipe, my story, my moment of glory. But she had not stolen my passion, my talent, or my ability to create something beautiful from nothing. I struck the match. But instead of burning my notebook, I lit a candle. And then I started cooking. I made the simplest thing I could think of, scrambled eggs. But I made them with intention, with love, with the understanding that this was not just about feeding myself. This was about remembering who I was, what I was capable of, and what I had to offer the world. The eggs were perfect. Creamy, rich, seasoned just right. I ate them slowly, savoring every bite, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than hurt and anger. I felt hope. The next day, I set up my phone camera and filmed myself making those same scrambled eggs. But this time, I did not just show the technique. I told the story. I talked about heartbreak and betrayal, about dreams deferred and friendship lost. I talked about the way cooking had saved me, had given me a way to transform pain into something nourishing. I called the video Cooking When Your Heart Is Shattered, and I uploaded it to my barely used TikTok account before I could change my mind. I went to bed that night expecting nothing. Maybe a few views from friends, maybe some polite comments. I certainly did not expect to wake up to thousands of views, hundreds of comments, and messages from people all over the world who had connected with my story. I needed to hear this today. Thank you for being so honest. Your vulnerability is beautiful. I am going through a divorce right now, and this made me want to cook again. You are so much more authentic than those perfect cooking shows. I read every comment, my heart swelling with each one. These were not just views or engagement metrics. These were real people who had seen something in my story that spoke to their own experiences. So I made another video. This time, I shared my grandmother's cornbread recipe, along with the story of how she had taught me that cooking was an act of love. Then I made a video about cooking for one, about learning to nourish yourself when you are starting over. Then another about comfort foods that actually comfort the soul. Each video was raw, honest, emotional. I did not try to be perfect or polished. I just tried to be real. And people responded. Not just with views and comments, but with their own stories. They shared their heartbreaks, their struggles, their small victories. They sent me pictures of dishes they had made using my recipes, along with notes about how cooking had helped them through difficult times. Within 6 months, I had gained over 100,000 followers. People were not just watching my videos, they were waiting for them. They were sharing them with friends, making the recipes for their families, using my content as a source of comfort and inspiration. I started calling my channel Salt and Survival, because that is what cooking had become for me. A way to add flavor to life even when everything felt bland and bitter. A way to survive the worst moments and transform them into something nourishing. The breakthrough came when my video, Cooking When Your Heart Is Shattered, went viral. Not just viral in the small world of food TikTok, but viral. Millions of views, shared across platforms, picked up by major media outlets. That is when James Morrison called. James was a producer for the Culinary Network, one of the biggest food television networks in the country. He had seen my video and wanted to meet. "Nina," he said during our first phone call, "you are not just a chef. You are a storyteller. And right now, people are hungry for authentic stories, for real emotions, for someone who is not afraid to show their scars." We met at a small cafe in downtown Los Angeles. James was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He listened as I told him about my journey, about the betrayal that had led me to this moment, about the community I had built around honest, emotional cooking. "I want to offer you a television show," he said. "Not a competition, not a gimmick. Just you in a kitchen, telling stories and teaching people to cook. We will call it Salt and Survival, Cooking Through Life Storms." I almost said no. The idea of being on television again, of putting myself out there in such a vulnerable way, terrified me. But then I thought about all the people who had reached out to me, who had found comfort in my stories, who had learned to cook as a way of healing. "Yes," I said. "Let us do it." The show was unlike anything on television. Instead of a sterile studio kitchen, we filmed in a space that felt like a real home. Instead of focusing on perfect techniques and expensive ingredients, we talked about cooking as a form of self-care, as a way to process emotions, as a tool for survival. Each episode began with a personal story, mine or one shared by a viewer. Then I would create a dish that somehow connected to that story, talking through the process not just of cooking, but of healing, of growing, of finding strength in the midst of struggle. The first episode was about betrayal. I made my grandmother's chicken and dumplings, talking about how comfort food can help us remember who we are when someone else tries to rewrite our story. The second was about loneliness, and I made a beautiful dinner for one, showing viewers that cooking for yourself is an act of self-love, not self-pity. The show was a hit, not just with food lovers, but with people who had never considered themselves cooks. People who were going through divorces, dealing with loss, starting over, finding their way back to themselves. And then came the cookbook deal. This time, it was my deal. My recipes, my stories, my vision. The publisher wanted to capitalize on the success of the show, and they gave me complete creative control. I spent months working on the book, pouring my heart into every page. Each recipe came with a story, a moment of connection, a piece of wisdom learned through experience. I included the smoked honey lavender chicken, of course, but I also included dozens of other dishes that had never seen the light of day. When it came time to write the dedication, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had first watched Melissa steal my recipe, and I thought about what I wanted to say. I could have dedicated it to my grandmother, to my supporters, to the journey of healing. All of those would have been appropriate and true, but instead I wrote this. To the thief who taught me fire. Thank you for the betrayal. I used it to cook. The book was published 6 months later, and it became a bestseller within its first week. Not just in the cooking category, but across all genres. People were buying it not just for the recipes, but for the stories, for the inspiration, for the proof that it is possible to transform pain into something beautiful. I went on book tours, gave interviews, appeared on talk shows. Everywhere I went, people told me their own stories of betrayal and resilience, of how cooking had helped them through their darkest moments. And then, almost exactly 2 years after that awful day in the television studio, I saw Melissa again. It was at a food expo in Chicago. I was there signing books, meeting fans, talking about the show. My publisher had set up a beautiful booth with pictures from the cookbook and episodes from the television show playing on screens. There was a long line of people waiting to meet me, to get their books signed, to share their stories. I was talking to a woman who had learned to cook as a way of dealing with grief when I saw her. Melissa was standing at the edge of the crowd, watching me. She looked different, older, maybe, or just tired. The confident glow that had always surrounded her was gone. I finished signing the woman's book and excused myself for a moment. I walked over to where Melissa was standing, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello, Melissa," I said. She looked at me with a mixture of surprise and something else I could not quite identify. Regret, maybe. Or shame. "Nina," she said softly. I never expected you to bounce back like this." "Bounce back?" I asked. "Is that what you think this is?" She gestured toward the booth, the crowd, the obvious success surrounding us. All of this. The show, the cookbook, the fame. I thought, after what happened. "After what happened?" I repeated. "You mean after you stole my recipe and claimed it as your own creation?" She flinched as if I had slapped her. "Nina, I know what you did, Melissa," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I know you took credit for my work, my story, my heart. And I know you have been struggling since then." It was true. I had kept tabs on her, not out of spite, but out of a kind of morbid curiosity. Her cookbook had been published about a year after the show aired, but it had received terrible reviews. Critics called it uninspired, derivative, lacking an authentic voice. Her second cookbook deal had been canceled. The brand partnerships had dried up. The fame had fizzled out as quickly as it had appeared. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "I got caught up in the moment, in the opportunity. I told myself that I was just helping you, that I was doing what you could not do for yourself. By stealing my story? By giving you a platform," she said, but even as she said it, I could see that she did not believe it herself. I looked at her. This woman who had been my best friend, who had shared my dreams and then claimed them as her own. I waited for the anger to rise, for the bitterness to take hold. But instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. "Melissa," I said, "do you know what the saddest part of all this is?" She shook her head. "If you had just been honest, if you had presented that dish as our collaboration, if you had given credit where it was due, we could have built something amazing together. But instead, you chose to take something that was not yours, and in doing so, you lost everything that was." I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of my cookbook. I signed it quickly and handed it to her. To Melissa, I had written, who taught me that the best recipes come from the heart, even when that heart is breaking. She took the book with trembling hands, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I am sorry, Nina," she whispered. "I am so sorry." I nodded. "I know you are. And I forgive you. And I meant it. Standing there in that crowded expo hall, surrounded by the success I had built from the ashes of betrayal, I realized that forgiveness was not about her. It was about me. It was about refusing to let her actions define my story or limit my future. Take care of yourself, Melissa, I said, and then I walked away. I returned to my booth, to the line of people waiting to meet me, to the life I had built from scratch. But as I signed books and listened to stories, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. Melissa had stolen my recipe, my story, my moment of triumph. But in doing so, she had also given me something invaluable. The fire that had forged me into someone stronger, more authentic, more connected to my true purpose. Without her betrayal, I might never have found my voice. I might have remained content to be her silent partner, her behind-the-scenes talent, her unacknowledged collaborator. I might never have learned to tell my own story, to claim my own space, to build my own success. The theft had been painful, devastating, life-changing. But it had also been necessary. It had stripped away everything I thought I knew about friendship, about trust, about the world. And in doing so, it had revealed what was truly mine, my talent, my passion, my ability to connect with people through food and story. That night, I returned to my hotel room and called my grandmother. She was 93 now, still sharp, still full of wisdom and love. "Grandma," I said, "I want to tell you something." "What is it, baby?" "I finally understand what you meant when you said that cooking is about feeding the soul. It is not just about the food. It is about the story, the connection, the healing that happens when we share our hearts with others." She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the smile in her voice when she spoke. "You always understood, Nina. You just needed to learn to trust yourself enough to share it with the world." As I hung up the phone, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The broken oven, the failed marriage, the stolen recipe, the viral video, the television show, the best-selling cookbook. Each step had been necessary, each pain had been purposeful, each setback had been a setup for something greater. I thought about the thousands of people who had reached out to me, who had found comfort in my stories, who had learned to cook as a way of healing. I thought about the woman at the expo who had told me that my recipes helped her through her grief. I thought about the man who had written to say that cooking had saved his marriage. I thought about the teenager who had found confidence in the kitchen after years of struggling with self-doubt. This was my legacy. Not just the recipes, not just the television show or the cookbook, but the connections, the healing, the proof that it is possible to transform pain into something beautiful and nourishing. I had learned that the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is success. It is building something so authentic, so meaningful, so true to your own voice that it cannot be stolen or replicated. It is taking the fire that someone else lit and using it to cook something even better than they could have imagined. And that is exactly what I did. The cookbook went on to win multiple awards. The television show was renewed for 3 more seasons. I opened my own restaurant, a small place where every dish told a story and every meal was an act of love. But more than any of that, I had found my voice. I had learned to tell my own story, to claim my own space, to build my own success on my own terms. And every time I step into a kitchen, every time I light a burner or pick up a knife, I remember that moment when I struck that match and chose to create instead of destroy, to build instead of burn, to cook instead of cry. Because that is what we do. We take the raw materials of our lives, the bitter and the sweet, the painful and the joyful, the stolen and the sacred, and we transform them into something nourishing, something beautiful, something that feeds not just our bodies but our souls. That is the real recipe for success. Not the perfect technique or the expensive ingredients or the stolen stories. Just the willingness to keep cooking, even when your heart is shattered. Especially then. Because that is when the real magic happens. Thank you for watching our channel. If this story of resilience and triumph inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of overcoming life's greatest challenges. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, and share this story with someone who needs to hear that their comeback can be greater than their setback. Your support means the world to us. The moment I saw her posting selfies in my old kitchen, wearing my apron and calling him her man, I knew exactly what I had to do. I was not going to compete with a 24-year-old intern. I was going to educate her. The coffee mug trembled in my hands as I stared at my phone screen. There she was again. Lexi Martinez, 24 years old, blonde highlights perfectly placed, posing in what used to be my kitchen. The kitchen where I had spent countless mornings preparing Ethan's precisely timed breakfast routine, where I had learned to make his coffee exactly 3/4 full, no sugar, with a splash of oat milk added counterclockwise. Cooking for my man, her caption read, followed by a heart emoji and the hashtag blessed. My man. My man. The audacity was breathtaking. I set the mug down before I could shatter it against the wall. My hands were shaking now, not from sadness, but from something far more dangerous. Something that had been building inside me for 3 weeks. Ever since Ethan had delivered his carefully rehearsed speech about needing space to rediscover himself. Space. What a beautiful euphemism for abandoning your wife of 9 years for someone who was probably still using a fake ID to buy wine. I scrolled through more of her photos. There was Ethan in the background of several shots, looking ridiculously pleased with himself. He had gotten a spray tan, something I had never seen him do in nearly a decade of marriage. His hair was styled differently too, with more gel than a teenager at prom. He was wearing clothes I did not recognize, trying desperately to look younger, hipper, more like someone who belonged with a woman who thought posting mirror selfies was a personality trait. It was pathetic. And yet, it hurt more than I could have imagined. I had given this man the best years of my life. I had supported him through law school, working double shifts as a nurse to keep us afloat. I had been there through his father's death, holding him while he cried and helping him plan the funeral because he was too broken to function. I had celebrated every promotion, every victory, every small triumph as if it were my own. I had loved him completely. And he had thrown it all away for someone who probably did not even know his middle name. But as I sat there in my empty apartment, the one I had been forced to move into after he decided to keep our house for his new life, something shifted inside me. The grief that had been consuming me for weeks began to transform into something else entirely. Clarity. I opened my laptop and began to research. Lexi Martinez, intern at Davidson and Associates law firm. Recent graduate from a local college with a degree in communications. Social media presence that screamed desperation for validation. And based on her recent posts, she was completely clueless about what she had gotten herself into. She thought she had won the lottery. She had no idea she had just inherited a nightmare. The plan formed slowly, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. I was not going to fight for Ethan. I was not going to beg him to come back or try to compete with someone half my age. I was going to do something far more satisfying. I was going to give Lexi exactly what she wanted. A complete education in being Ethan's girlfriend. And then I was going to watch her run. The next morning, I sent her a direct message on Instagram. My hands were steady now, my mind clear and focused. Hi Lexi. I know this might seem strange, but I think we should talk. I have no interest in causing drama or trying to win Ethan back. I just think there are some things you should know about being with him. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I promise I am not crazy, and I am not trying to sabotage anything. I just want to clear the air and maybe share some insights that might help you both be happy. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. She responded within an hour. Sure, I guess. But I am not going to listen to you badmouth him, or try to make me feel guilty. He told me about how controlling you were, so I already know your deal. Controlling. Of course he had painted me as controlling. Taking care of someone's every need, anticipating their wants, managing their life so they could focus on their career. Apparently that was controlling now. I smiled as I typed my response. Of course not. I just want to help you avoid some of the mistakes I made. See you at Brewster's Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. She agreed. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I made lists, organized my thoughts, and most importantly, I practiced my delivery. This had to be perfect. Too obvious, and she would see through it. Too subtle, and she would miss the point entirely. I had to make her think I was being helpful while simultaneously showing her exactly what she had signed up for. The next afternoon, I arrived at Brewster's Cafe 15 minutes early. I chose a corner table with good lighting. I wanted to see every expression on her face. I ordered a simple coffee and waited. She walked in exactly on time, and I had to admit, she was beautiful. Young, fresh-faced, with that kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having been truly disappointed by life. She was wearing a crop top that showed off her flat stomach, and carrying a purse so small it could barely fit a phone. She spotted me immediately. I was the only woman in the cafe over 30, and approached with a smile that was equal parts nervous and smug. "You must be Sarah," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I am Lexi." "Thank you for meeting me," I replied, shaking her hand and gesturing to the chair across from me. "I really appreciate it. Can I get you something to drink?" "Just a green tea, thanks." I ordered her tea and watched as she settled into her chair, checking her phone twice and glancing around the cafe as if she was afraid someone might see her. "So," she said, folding her hands on the table, "Ethan said you wanted to talk. He also said you might try to convince me to leave him, so I just want to be clear that I am not going anywhere." I smiled warmly. "I would never ask you to do that. Actually, I think it is wonderful that Ethan has found someone who makes him happy. He deserves that." Her expression softened slightly. "Oh, well, that is not what I expected." "I know this whole situation is awkward," I continued, "but I have no interest in getting back together with him. Our marriage ran its course, and I am actually grateful that he was honest about his feelings instead of stringing me along." This was a complete lie, but she did not need to know that. "The thing is," I went on, "I spent 9 years learning how to make Ethan happy. I figured out all his little quirks and preferences, and I thought maybe I could share some of that knowledge with you. You know, help you avoid some of the trial and error I went through." Lexi's tea arrived, and she wrapped her hands around the mug, considering my words. "That is actually really mature of you," she said finally. "Most ex-wives would probably be way more bitter." "Well, I was bitter for a while," I admitted, "but I realized that holding on to anger was only hurting me. And honestly, watching Ethan try to be young again has been pretty entertaining." She laughed at this, and some of the tension left her shoulders. "The spray tan was my idea," she said with a grin. "I thought it would help him look more relaxed." "It certainly made him look different," I replied diplomatically. "So what kind of things did you want to tell me?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, where I had prepared a carefully curated list. Well, first off, his morning routine is very specific. He needs to wake up at exactly 6:15 a.m., not 6:10, not 6:20. He will be grumpy all day if his internal clock is off. And his coffee has to be ready by 6:30, 3/4 full, with oat milk added counterclockwise. I know it sounds ridiculous, but trust me on this one. She was taking notes on her phone. He also changes his diet every month or so. Right now he is probably doing some kind of intermittent fasting thing, but next month it might be keto, or paleo, or whatever new trend he read about. Just go with it and try not to comment on how extreme it is." "Okay," she said, still typing. "What else?" "His laundry is really important to him. Everything has to be folded a specific way. His socks especially. He learned it in ROTC in college and never got over it. If you fold them wrong, he will redo them without saying anything, but he will be annoyed about it. Military-style sock folding. Got it." "And his mother," I continued, watching her face carefully. "She calls every Sunday at 4 p.m. sharp. Whatever you do, do not answer the phone if she calls. She still thinks I am his wife, and she has some very strong opinions about appropriate girlfriends for her son." Lexi looked up from her phone, frowning slightly. "What kind of opinions?" "Well, let us just say she has traditional values about age-appropriate relationships. She is not going to be your biggest fan initially, but if you can win her over with your cooking and your interest in his career, she might warm up to you." "His career?" "Oh yes, you will need to be very supportive of his work. He likes to come home and decompress by telling you about his day in great detail. Even if you have had a terrible day yourself, you will need to listen and ask thoughtful questions. He does not handle it well when the focus is not on him." I watched as this information sank in. Her enthusiasm was starting to fade slightly. "And cooking," I continued. "He is very particular about food. He thinks he is a food critic, so he will critique everything you make. Do not take it personally when he suggests improvements or compares your meals to restaurants. He means well, he is just very specific about his preferences. What are his preferences? I spent the next 20 minutes walking her through Ethan's complicated relationship with food, how he needed his vegetables cut a certain way, how he would not eat leftovers that were more than 2 days old, how he expected dinner to be ready by 7 p.m. every night regardless of what her schedule looked like. He also has this thing about the TV, I added. He refuses to watch anything with subtitles, but he also cannot hear dialogue very well, so you will spend a lot of time adjusting the volume and rewinding scenes. I learned to preload subtitles on Netflix and turn them on without him noticing. He cannot just wear headphones. You would think so, but he says they give him headaches. Lexi was looking increasingly overwhelmed. And his friends, I continued. They are going to be weird about you at first. They are all married to women closer to their own age, and they might make some comments. Just ignore them and focus on being charming. Eventually they will get used to you. What kind of comments? Oh, you know. Jokes about trophy wives, comments about how lucky Ethan is, that sort of thing. They do not mean anything by it. It is just their way of processing the age difference. This was not entirely true. Ethan's friends were actually decent people who had been horrified by his behavior, but I wanted her to be prepared for the worst. And his ex-wife, I said, gesturing to myself with a self-deprecating smile. He is going to compare you to me sometimes. Not in a mean way, just in a Sarah used to do this or Sarah always handled that kind of way. Try not to let it bother you. He is just adjusting to the change. That would definitely bother me, she admitted. I know it sounds like a lot, I said, softening my voice. But once you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature. And he really is a good man underneath all the quirks. He just needs someone who understands how to take care of him. Lexi nodded slowly, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. Would you be willing to show me how to make his favorite meal? She asked hesitantly. I tried to cook for him last week, and he barely touched it. Of course, I said, trying to hide my satisfaction. How about this weekend? I could come over and walk you through it step by step. That would be amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really did not expect you to be so nice about all this. Like I said, I just want everyone to be happy. We finished our drinks and exchanged phone numbers. As we stood to leave, Lexi hesitated. Can I ask you something? She said. Why did you and Ethan really break up? I mean, if you knew how to handle all his quirks and you were so good at taking care of him, what went wrong? I considered my answer carefully. I think I got tired of being his mother instead of his wife. I said finally, but you are young and energetic. You might have better luck finding the balance. She nodded thoughtfully and gathered her tiny purse. Thank you again for this. I really appreciate your honesty. Anytime, I replied. I am here if you need anything. As she walked away, I allowed myself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. The weekend could not come fast enough. I arrived at my former home, their home now, on Saturday morning with a bag full of groceries and a carefully planned agenda. The house looked exactly the same, except for a few touches that were clearly Lexi's doing. Fresh flowers on the kitchen counter, scented candles in the living room, throw pillows that clashed horribly with the couch I had picked out. Ethan was nowhere to be seen, which was perfect. He is at the gym, Lexi explained as she let me in. He said he would be back around noon. Perfect. That gives us plenty of time to prep everything. I had chosen to teach her how to make Ethan's favorite meal, beef bourguignon with roasted vegetables and homemade bread. It was a complex dish that required precise timing and multiple techniques. Under normal circumstances, I would have suggested starting with something simpler, but these were not normal circumstances. This looks really complicated, Lexi said, studying the recipe I had printed out for her. It is a bit involved, I admitted, but Ethan absolutely loves it. I used to make it for special occasions, anniversaries, promotions, that sort of thing. He always said it was better than any restaurant. Okay, where do we start? I walked her through each step slowly and deliberately. How to properly brown the beef, how to build the flavor base, how to time everything so it would be ready exactly when needed. I showed her how to check the doneness of the meat, how to adjust the seasoning, how to present it attractively. But I also made sure to emphasize how long everything took, how much attention the dish required, how easy it was to ruin if you were not careful. The key is constant vigilance, I explained as we stirred the simmering pot. You cannot just set it and forget it. You need to check on it every 15 minutes, adjust the heat, taste the sauce, make sure nothing is burning. This is a lot of work for one meal, she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. Welcome to Ethan's world, I replied cheerfully. He has very high standards when it comes to food, but it is worth it when you see how happy it makes him. As we worked, I shared more stories about my life with Ethan, how I had learned to anticipate his needs, how I had gradually taken on more and more responsibilities to make his life easier, how I had eventually found myself managing every aspect of his existence. It sounds exhausting, Lexi said as she kneaded the bread dough. It can be, I agreed. But that is what love is, right? Putting someone else's needs first. She looked thoughtful but did not respond. When Ethan walked in at 12:30, the kitchen smelled incredible, and Lexi was flushed with pride and exhaustion. Something smells amazing in here, he said, kissing Lexi on the cheek and barely acknowledging me. Lexi made beef bourguignon, I said brightly. I just provided a little guidance. Wow, that is ambitious, he said, lifting the lid to peer into the pot. It smells right. We will see how it tastes. I watched Lexi's face fall slightly at his lukewarm response. Sarah says it is your favorite, she said hopefully. It is, he replied, but his attention was already shifting to his phone. What time will it be ready? I have a conference call at 2. About an hour, Lexi said, looking to me for confirmation. Maybe a little longer, I corrected. You do not want to rush it. Ethan frowned. I need to eat before my call. I could make you a sandwich, Lexi offered quickly. No, I will wait. Just make sure it is ready on time. He disappeared into his home office, leaving Lexi looking stressed and deflated. Do not worry, I said gently. He is just hangry. He will be much happier once he eats. But I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. The meal was ready at 1:45, perfectly timed despite Ethan's pressure. I helped Lexi plate everything beautifully and set the table with the good china. This looks incredible, I said, and it really did. You should be proud of yourself. Ethan emerged from his office exactly at 2, looking impatient. I have 5 minutes to eat before my call, he announced. Can you reschedule? Lexi asked. I spent all morning cooking this. No, I cannot reschedule. This is an important client. He sat down and began eating quickly, barely tasting the food. I watched Lexi's face as she realized that her hours of work were being consumed like fast food. How is it? She asked tentatively. Good, he said without looking up. Maybe a little too much salt in the sauce, and the meat could be more tender, but it is good. I saw her wince at the criticism. I thought it was perfect, I said diplomatically. Better than most restaurants. The technique is right, Ethan said, still eating rapidly. Just needs some refinement. He finished his plate in under 3 minutes, kissed Lexi quickly on the forehead, and disappeared back into his office. I am sorry, I said after he left. He gets focused when he has work calls. It is fine, Lexi said, but she was clearly hurt. I just thought he would be more appreciative. He is, I assured her. He just shows it differently than you might expect. But I could see her starting to question things. Over the next few weeks, I continued my education campaign. I gave Lexi detailed lists of Ethan's preferences, taught her his routines, and helped her navigate the increasingly complex demands of being his girlfriend. I showed her how to organize his closet, how to manage his social calendar, how to handle his interactions with his mother. I explained his exercise routine, his work schedule, his TV preferences, and his sleeping habits. And with each lesson, I watched her enthusiasm dim a little more. Does he ever do anything for himself? She asked one afternoon as we folded his laundry according to his specifications. What do you mean? I mean, I feel like I am his personal assistant, not his girlfriend. I do his shopping, I make his meals, I organize his life. What does he do for me? I paused, considering my answer carefully. He provides for you, I said finally. He takes care of the big picture stuff while you handle the details. It is a partnership. But what about romance? What about spontaneity? What about just fun? Ethan is not really a spontaneous person, I explained. He likes routine and predictability. But he shows his love through actions, not grand gestures. What actions? I struggled to come up with examples. The truth was, Ethan had become increasingly self-absorbed over the years, expecting more and more while giving less and less. But I could not say that directly. He works hard to give you a comfortable life, I said instead. He includes you in his world, introduces you to his friends, makes you part of his routine. For him, that is love. But I could see she was not buying it anymore. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Lexi called me, crying. I cannot do this anymore, she sobbed into the phone. I feel like I am losing myself. What happened? His mother called today while he was at work. She spent 20 minutes lecturing me about how I was too young for him, how I was obviously just using him for money, how I would never be good enough for her son. And when I told Ethan about it, he just said I needed to try harder to win her over. I am sorry, I said, genuinely meaning it. She can be difficult. And then he criticized the dinner I made because the vegetables were not cut uniformly. He actually got out a ruler, Sarah. A ruler. And when I got upset about it, he said I was being too sensitive and that if I wanted to be with him, I needed to accept his standards. That does sound frustrating. I feel like I am walking on eggshells all the time. I am constantly worried about doing something wrong, forgetting some detail, not meeting his expectations. This is not what I thought a relationship would be like. I let her cry for a few minutes before responding. You know, I said carefully, you do not have to stay with someone who makes you feel that way. But I love him, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Do you? Or do you love the idea of him? The successful lawyer, the nice house, the status? There was a long pause. I do not know anymore, she admitted. I thought I did, but now I am not sure I even know who he really is. All I know is his routines and his preferences and his demands. That is not love, I said gently. That is servitude. Is that what it was like for you? I took a deep breath. For the last few years, yes. I lost myself trying to be perfect for him. I became so focused on meeting his needs that I forgot I had needs too. And when I finally started to remember, he decided he needed someone who would not ask for anything in return. Someone like me. Someone like you were when you started dating him. Young, eager to please, willing to adapt to his world instead of expecting him to adapt to yours. I feel so stupid, she said. You are not stupid. You are young and you believed what you wanted to believe. We all do that sometimes. I do not know how to get out of this. I moved in with him, I left my apartment, I turned down other opportunities because I thought we had a future together. You can get out, I said firmly. You are 24 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. Do not waste it trying to fix someone who does not want to be fixed. But what about him? What about us? What about you? I countered. What about your dreams, your goals, your happiness? When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Another long pause. I cannot even remember, she said quietly. Then you have your answer. 2 days later, Lexi texted me. I am leaving him. I applied for graduate school, and I am moving back in with my roommate. Thank you for everything. I know you were trying to help me understand him, but what I understood was that I deserve better. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and genuine affection for this young woman who had finally found her backbone. You absolutely deserve better, I texted back. Good luck with everything. I am proud of you for choosing yourself. Can I ask you something? She replied. Did you know this would happen when you started helping me? I considered lying, but she deserved honesty. I hoped you would figure it out, I admitted. I could not tell you to leave him. You had to realize it for yourself. But I wanted you to see what you were really signing up for. You saved me from wasting years of my life. Thank you. You saved yourself. I just gave you the information you needed to make an informed decision. That was the last I heard from her for 2 weeks. Then on a Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Can we talk? I made a mistake. I miss you. No one gets me like you do. I read the message 3 times, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no hurt, no temptation to respond with anything other than the truth. I opened my camera app and took a photo of myself. I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, wearing a red dress I had bought the week before, looking genuinely happy for the first time in months. Next to me, barely visible in the frame, was David, a man I had met at a book club who was actually my age, and who treated me like an equal partner rather than a personal assistant. I sent the photo to Ethan with a simple caption. Do not worry. I trained him too. But that was a lie. David did not need training. He was a fully formed adult who could fold his own socks, make his own breakfast, and handle his own relationship with his mother. He was someone who wanted to build a life with me, not have me manage his life for him. He was everything Ethan was not. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lexi. Saw your post on Instagram. You look amazing. Coffee soon. I would love that, I replied. And I meant it. This young woman who had been my unwitting accomplice in the perfect revenge had become something I had not expected. A friend. We met the following Saturday at the same cafe where I had first begun her education. She looked different now, more confident, more herself. Her hair was styled in a way that suited her face rather than what she thought men wanted to see. She was wearing clothes that fit her personality instead of trying to look like someone else's idea of the perfect girlfriend. You look great, I said as she sat down. I feel great, she replied. I start graduate school next month. I am going to study environmental law. That is wonderful. What changed your mind about law school? Being with Ethan, actually. I realized I was attracted to his success and his intelligence, but I was approaching it all wrong. Instead of trying to be the perfect accessory to someone else's career, I decided to build my own. That is incredibly mature. I learned from the best, she said with a grin. Speaking of which, tell me about this new guy. He looks much more age-appropriate. I laughed. His name is David. He is a professor at the university. We met at a book club. A book club? How wonderfully normal. I know, right? He reads actual books, not just legal briefs. He cooks for me sometimes. He asks about my day, and actually listens to the answers. He has never once criticized my folding technique. Revolutionary, she said sarcastically. The crazy thing is, I had forgotten that relationships could be easy. I had gotten so used to working constantly to make someone else happy that I forgot I was supposed to be happy too. I almost made the same mistake, she admitted. I was so focused on being what he wanted that I lost track of what I wanted. What do you want now? Everything, she said with a smile. I want to travel, I want to learn, I want to make a difference in the world. I want to date people who challenge me intellectually, not people who expect me to manage their lives. I want to be a partner, not a servant. That sounds perfect. What about you? Are you happy? I considered the question seriously. I am, I said, surprised by how true it felt. For the first time in years, I am genuinely happy. I have my own life, my own goals, my own identity. I am not defined by someone else's needs or expectations. And Ethan? What about him? Do you think he has learned anything from all this? I thought about his pathetic text message, his assumption that I would be waiting for him to realize his mistake. I doubt it, I said honestly. I think he is probably looking for someone new to train. Someone who will take care of him without asking for anything in return. That is sad. It is. But it is not my problem anymore. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the world go by outside the cafe windows. Can I tell you something? Lexi said finally. Of course. When I first met you, I thought you were pathetic. I thought you were this bitter ex-wife who could not let go. I felt sorry for you. And now I think you are brilliant. You got the perfect revenge without lifting a finger. You just gave me enough information to see the truth for myself. The truth was always there, I said. I just helped you recognize it. Do you think he knows what you did? I think he suspects. But he will never admit it, even to himself. That would require acknowledging that the problem was not me being too controlling or you being too young, or any of the other excuses he makes. It would require admitting that he is the common denominator in all his failed relationships. And he will never do that. Probably not. But that is okay. I am not trying to change him anymore. I am just trying to live my life. Speaking of which, she said, pulling out her phone, I have to show you something. She scrolled through her Instagram feed and handed me the phone. It was a post from Ethan's account. A photo of him at a bar, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him, with the caption, "Back to the single life." He looks miserable, I observed. He should be. He had two amazing women who were willing to love him. And he threw both of us away for completely different reasons. You for being too independent, me for being too dependent. There is no pleasing someone like that. There really is not. Do you regret it? The revenge, I mean. I thought about it seriously. No, I said finally. I regret the years I spent trying to be someone I was not. I regret losing myself in someone else's expectations. But I do not regret showing you who he really was, and I do not regret the way it ended. Good, she said firmly. Because you saved us both. We saved each other. As we prepared to leave, Lexi hesitated. Can I ask you for one more favor? Sure. When you inevitably run into him somewhere, because you will, this is not a big city, will you give him a message from me? What message? Tell him I said thank you. Thank you for showing me exactly what I do not want in a partner. Thank you for teaching me to value myself. And thank you for being such a perfect example of what happens when someone chooses ego over empathy. I smiled. I will be sure to pass that along. And Sarah? Yes. Next time you see him, make sure you are wearing that red dress. I laughed out loud. Deal. As we walked out of the cafe together, I felt a sense of completion I had not expected. This young woman who had been my husband's replacement had become something far more valuable. A reminder that women do not have to compete with each other for men who are not worth having. We had both learned the same lesson, just from different angles. Love should not require you to lose yourself. A good partner should not need to be managed like a child. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. My phone buzzed with another text from Ethan. I know you are angry, but we could try again. I have changed. I showed the message to Lexi, who rolled her eyes. Some people never learn, she said. No, I agreed. But some people do. I deleted the message without responding and put my phone away. I had said everything I needed to say. The red dress had spoken for itself. If you enjoyed this story of sweet revenge and female empowerment, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life stories. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You would not want to miss what happens when karma comes calling. Your support means the world to us, and we love sharing these powerful stories with you. Subscribe now and join our community of strong, independent people who know their worth.